Ukraine still These are Swedish CB-90 patrol boats that were donated by the Swedes to Ukraine to be used for coastal patrol operations. They are patrolling the only shoreline Ukraine still currently controls, located in beautiful and sunny Odessa, twisting and turning like a naval roller coaster bouncing upon the waves of the Black Sea. Here, the central hub of Kiev's besieged shipping and maritime industry is located. It has become one of Russia's main targets for long-range drone and ballistic missile attacks as they try to disrupt Ukraine's vulnerable shipping routes, which was attacked last night as we arrived and lasted until the early morning. We were not staying far away from port infrastructure, the very same that Moscow had decided this night had to be bombarded. Odessa has the largest port in unoccupied Ukraine, which is the heart of the city and a vital artery in Kiev's trade network, allowing farmers to keep their grain flowing to the international market at a much lower cost than transport by rail, while supplying Kiev with much-needed foreign currency reserves, vital for paying the nation's debts, paying for imports, and maintaining the value of Ukraine's national currency, the hryvnia. Without this trade node, not only would farmers that form the backbone of Ukraine's economy have to pay significantly more to transport their wheat, barley, and sunflower oils, but it could undermine Ukraine's general economic stability. In early 2022, as the full-scale invasion started, not only was trade access through the Black Sea threatened, but control of Odessa itself. The Russians captured Kherson and were pushing to capture the city of Mykolaiv, the last barrier before Russia's southern army could march on Odessa. The Russian fleet performed naval operations along Odessa's shore, including naval drills, missile strikes against port infrastructure, and enforced a blockade of their remaining unoccupied ports. But as the Russian army failed to take Mykolaiv and were pushed out of Kherson over the Dnipro River, Russia started to suffer some of their worst naval defeats since World War II, losing ships to aerial drones, missiles, including the high-profile sinking of the Russian Black Sea Fleet's flagship, the Moskva, along with naval drones strapped with explosives. This combined threat would cripple the fleet and keep it far from the shores of Odessa, fearful of further losses. The threat of a Russian marine landing had ended. This failure to dominate the seas around Ukraine would mean that Kiev could continue to ship grain without any need to consult with the Kremlin and keep trade flowing. Russian military command would reciprocate these setbacks through escalating its air campaign against Odessa as the war dragged on, making it a major target for Russia's long-range drone war and missile forces, which intended to destroy what they could not control. Why did you volunteer?
Тому що я полюбляю море, полюбляю, скажімо так, ці краєвиди.
During this type of work, what is the biggest dangers for crews like yours?
Попадання шахеда або ракети – це є, небезпека.
Have the shaheeds gotten more active recently? Are there more shaheeds?
Так, набагато більше. Раніше вони були рідші. Зараз вони літають просто пачками. То, що при попаданні по шахеду, це здається, це важким, але при першому або другому попаданні по ньому він не завжди падає. Іноді його треба просто перетворити в решето. Зазвичай це тяжко. Усі втомлені, усі вже, скажімо так, зморені постійних нічних атак.
How often are these attacks?
Щоночі майже.
When's the last time you shot down a shaheed?
Часов 5 назад. Шахеди йшли в 2 етапи. Перший це було, якщо не помиляюсь, то близько 8 шахедів і другий раз близько 9.
Скільки шахедів збили вчора?
2. Кілька годин назад тільки вернулися. Палуба в гільзах була закидана, от тут під нами ще видно гільз багато. Браунінг М2.
Have you always used the Browning?
Так, у нас їх є 3. Один, от ви бачите, кільцева установка, а 2 на носовому. Він чисто по носовому, коли висаджуємо десант, він вкриває. Крім того, ще видали так само М240, це дуже отлично, і МК-19 гранатомети американські, це теж взагалі отлично. Приймаємо участь, так. Да. За шахідами сказали, це одна з головних. Плюс постійно проводимо протимінний огляд, ходимо, от ви бачите, яка хвиля, воно все відриває, піднімає десь міни, а зерновий коридор, щоб не було ніяких цих. Також проблема така є беки, безекіпажний катер, це камікадзе. В 4 рази більше заложено тротілу, ніж в шахіду, тобто катер, якщо з ним здибається, не дай Бог, звісно, вже не буде що збирати там.
Another threat crews like this have to look out for, and are being sought out during today's patrol, are sea mines. While failing to blockade the port, by dropping sea mines, the Russians can still endanger shipping routes. Even if they don't destroy or damage any ship, the insurance companies that insure the merchant vessels will charge farmers more to insure those boats moving any product out of the port. The effect has been higher shipping costs and rusty, volatile sea mines washing up on Ukraine's most popular beaches.
Коли нам тут треба, і відходимо на 200 метрів і розстрілюємо їх. Знешкоджуємо, ліквідуємо.
What's the best part of the job?
Коли приходимо з бойового завдання, заварюємо каву, чай і спілкуємося, раді, що вийшли, так скажемо, дзвонимо, телефонуємо до рідних, все добре. Ми їм практично майже не розказуємо, менше знають, крепше сплять, якби так.
Despite the war, despite everything, the water out here is beautiful, and so is the city itself. This land has been controlled by the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, which placed the city of Odessa where it now sits on the ruins of a Greek settlement named Odessos. It was then controlled by the Ukrainian People's Republic, the Soviet Union, the German Reich, the Soviets again, before once more being controlled by an independent Ukrainian state. And that was just in the last 250 years. During that time, Odessa became a trading hub, one that flourished for hundreds of years and attracted colonists outside of Russia by design. Meaning those who would come to live in Odessa would include Pontic Greeks, Moldovans, Poles, Bulgarians, and Italians, with French and Italian designers like Francisco Buffo, who designed the famous Potemkin stairs, having heavy influence on the planning and architecture of the city. You can still see this influence in the buildings within the historic city center, recently declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2023 after multiple bombings. This attempt to provide Odessa's city center with more protection with international recognition of its outstanding universal value has not stopped long-range attacks of targets in the city center. Beneath the seagulls, air raid sirens, and intricate neoclassical and Baroque style buildings, I found an art cooperative, only identifiable by the small sign at the entrance. So much art.
Так же, как поставили они ракеты для чего? Чтобы по Крыму долбить, там,
Конечно,
Лужанский
сейчас
район.
мост будут перебивать, конечно.
Ну, нахрен уничтожить Киев.
Согласен.
Уничтожить Львов.
То уничтожим, давайте хотя бы там, где, откуда эти ракеты поступают, там же этот переход, он...
А столицей сделаем Одессу, да?
Да, которую мы сохраним.
Нет, мы Одессу, конечно, не сохраним, простите. Мы ее потом заново отстроим. Так будет гораздо проще. Нет зерновой сделки, ну, значит, Украине не нужны порты, да и вопрос Черного моря должен быть решен так же, как решился вопрос Азовского моря. Поэтому, конечно, очень жалко исторические строения, но не первый раз в истории нашей страны отстроены лучше, чем прежние. Чертежи ведь остались. Я понимаю, как вам тяжело. Вы одессит, вы любите Одессу, для вас это родной город. Сейчас вы подверглись травле. Из нашей передачи вырезали фрагмент, где вы как раз со мной спорили и были против нанесения ударом по Одессе, но украинская пропаганда феноменально тупая. Вот просто феноменально. Но лгут, значит, боятся. Ну и правильно боятся. Вы же как-никак в скором будущем губернатор Одессы. Пусть вас боятся.
Despite Russian drone and missile strikes that often left civilians without power or becoming casualties of the war themselves, Russian leadership still maintains a romantic view of Odessa. They deeply yearn to return in force, to assert control of its sunny beaches, historic architecture, catacombs, and cultural treasures. The modern settlement that became Odessa was founded by Catherine the Great after a war with the Ottoman Empire in her quest to have a port along the Black Sea. Crimea now serves as their primary naval base in the Black Sea. Yet denying Ukraine access to a coastline, sea-based trade, and its ability to hunt down the Black Sea fleet with naval drones motivates Kremlin leadership. Russian aristocracy started traveling to Odessa for tourism in the 19th century, with its beautiful beaches being a major draw for those seeking an escape from the duller moments of high society in the late 1800s. Travelers came from cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, the capital of the Russian Empire and a center of the empire's wealth, aristocratic life, and culture. Those guests needed a place of culture while outside of the empire's center. Odessa provided that. Traveling blue bloods and socialites needed cultural entertainment when the sun went down and the beaches emptied. In 1810, the Odessan Opera House, designed by Italian architect Francesco Frappoli and Jean-François Thomas di Tolman, finished construction. This original design was destroyed in 1873 in a fire before being rebuilt by Venetian architects in its current form in 1887. Taking heavy influences from the German opera house Zempa Europa, it has served as the center of opera and ballet in Ukraine. Nowadays, the theater is much more affordable and accessible to the general public, which is good not only for locals or visiting Yankee journalists, but for the many soldiers who come to Odessa for their vacation time away from the front.
Прийшов, це підвищення по посаді було.
Did you volunteer to be with the Navy? Were you interested in the Navy?
Так, звичайно, я з 15-го року вже у військово-морських силах.
Oh, so before the large-scale invasion, during the ATO?
Так. Проходив службу спочатку на катері типу Island, потім там типу Island. Ну, офіцером. Да. Так, звичайно. Потім став командиром катера. І після вже прийшов сюди.
When an attack starts, do you get on the boat and then come out, or you're already out on the water when you're called to duty?
Ні, ми вже готові. Катери вже знаходяться на позиціях. Ну, тут є певні обмеження, бо в морі також ми маємо міні-райони, ми маємо хвилювання моря, яке дуже впливає на ведення вогню по повітряних цілях.
What do you find the most difficult part of commanding these boats to be?
Что самое тяжелое, вот что в нашей работе? Вот.
Видеть семью, постоянно находиться на работе и
Окей.
lack of sleeping.
Я.
What advice would you give somebody who wanted to join the Navy?
Яку пораду? От пораду тим, хто хоче прийти.
Куда?
Не бійтеся вмерти.
Love your motherland.
Since you have been serving during the large-scale invasion, how has your job changed? Has there been any big changes you've noticed?
Так, звичайно, ми постійно на роботі і постійно виконуємо задачі. Кожен вечір катери працюють по шахідам. Ну, вони летять по 15 за раз. Ну, коли я закінчував інститут, то, звичайно, такого ми не очікували. Ніхто не очікував в 2020 році такого. Але за час війни ми розвиваємось, ми навчаємось.
Ukraine's air defense ammunition shortage is no secret. While exactly how many anti-air munitions still exist in Ukrainian reserves for systems like the US-designed Patriot is not public, it's widely known that Ukraine doesn't have the capacity to replenish its ammunition shortfall on its own. Kyiv's international partners either don't have the production infrastructure necessary to replace losses, they have manufacturing bottlenecks, leadership that's not feeling it's in their interest to send over their limited quantity, they pass on responsibility to other parties, or some combination of all of these factors. Excuses do not stop ballistic missiles.
Україна нуждається в ППО, бо всі ми бачимо, що атаки противника з повітря збільшуються. І ППО дуже критично для нас потрібно.
Air defense teams don't just have to worry about attacks directly against the port they protect. Some strikes are designed to go around where most air defense teams are operating, to keep defenders guessing as to where their route may be, stretching out air defense and giving Moscow a higher chance of success. To try to cover up the immense amount of airspace that Russia could potentially utilize, anti-air machine gun technicals, like this team operating an M2 Browning machine gun, are sent to cover the gaps, spreading around in every direction from Odessa so there is no clear path of attack.
Взагалі йому треба попасти либо в бойову головку, яка знаходиться спереді, чи в мотор. І він впаде. Стрілять, це можна його з одного патрона його збити, чи можна вистріляти 200 і не збити його. Це по-різному.
Do you think that Russian attacks have increased recently?
Так, вони стали набагато інтенсивніше і б'ють чаще по мирним жителям. Для нас стало тяжче, те, що вони прогресують і злітають вище, летять вище, і ускладнюють нам роботу цим.
Teams like this can help provide Ukraine with lower maintenance requirements and costs to take down long-range drone targets, but not cruise or ballistic missiles. Even the drones themselves have gotten harder to hit at times than at the start of the war, not just because now Russia waits until night to paint their drones black and send them off on attack missions while Ukrainians sleep, but also because select drones have been equipped with jet engines, making them next to impossible for pickup truck-based anti-air machine gun teams that Ukraine has in quantity to take them down. The use of decoy drones also increases the targets that teams must focus on, giving drones more chances to get through air defense, leaving plenty of work for those men to do. As we left the team to their work and headed back inside Odessa, we heard the unmistakable sound of a Russian drone above our car as it headed off towards its target. Air raid sirens followed soon after, as the city was under attack once more. Our team drove around to the reported sites of the attack, finding the work of the Russian Federation as we stepped on the glass strewn about sidewalks, until cameraman Devin San Luis found an apartment set ablaze by the attack. Throughout 2025 and the start of 2026, despite hopeful hot air about a quick end to the war at the start of the new administration, there is still no immediate end to the war in sight. In fact, throughout the new admin, the size and scale of air attacks notably increased across the board as missile interceptions declined. Russian general focus on the Donbass does not mean Russian leadership has readjusted its position. Odessa is still viewed by those authorities as a fundamentally Russian city that therefore must be controlled by the authorities in Moscow. While this goal is not immediately achievable, that does not mean it has been forgotten. What is seen as more immediately achievable for now is the crippling of Ukrainian port infrastructure, making farming less viable for those operating on tight margins, and keeping the locals that were invited with force to join the Russian world hiding in their apartment corridors. After meeting Odessan locals, I can say that the last objective may actually be the hardest, as many have hardened themselves against the war that will soon exceed the Third Reich's invasion of the Soviet Union in length. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to today's program. Welcome. It is 6:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3:33 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and 1:33 a.m. here in the general Kiev area. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. It is Thursday. The end of the week is nigh. You can see it right around the corner. It is tomorrow, the last day. And so I'm going to help you guys get right over the edge when it comes to your news update. We're going to go through a few news updates, including Ukrainian drones crashing the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, attacking an oil refinery, as well as Russian military assets, and specifically a Russian naval asset, a boat, which they released footage of. This was not immediately this attack, but they were attacking naval assets, attacking military assets in this attack. But it was from a previous attack, which they just released. Very interesting footage. We'll check that out as well. We're also going to talk about Zelensky's letter, an open letter to Vladimir Putin, asking Putin to come to the table to negotiate and accept a ceasefire along the front line, a frozen ceasefire, meaning that, the fighting just stops where it is and we just accept it for what it is. Meaning that they don't settle the territorial issue right now. They don't settle any other issue right now. They just allow it to lie where it is and stop the bloodletting. The immediate reaction from the Kremlin was to invite Zelensky to say, hey, if you're serious, come to Moscow. That seems to be essentially like a batting away of the offer. Anytime the Russians say, well, Zelensky should come to Moscow, you need to understand that in the context that the Russians have tried to kill Zelensky multiple times. And so expecting Zelensky to go to Moscow when they've tried to assassinate him from the very start of this massive full-scale war, it's not to be taken seriously. But then after that, Putin said that he had received the letter and then they would be responding. So it seems that was an immediate reaction. An immediate reaction was, well, if you're serious about peace, come to Moscow, which is a non-starter. And the secondary reaction was, we will consider it. I don't know if the secondary action came specifically because Donald Trump came forward and he was like, oh, I'm happy to see that this type of thing is happening, and then started to take credit for it, even though it was the Ukrainians of their own accord offering this. But, whatever, either way. This also coincides with the Ukrainians sending a letter to the Trump administration specifically asking them for more air defense munitions, more THAAD interceptors, more PAC-1, PAC-2s for the Patriots. So more systems to take out Russia's ballistic missile arsenal with the THAADs and to take out their cruise missile and drone arsenal. But mostly these are for the missiles. Also, I want to thank Libis for the $50 donation yesterday. I didn't see that, so I just wanted to say thank you. I think it was after I was off stream. So thank you in retrospect. Did I hear that right? Dylan is going to... Okay. You know what, Ellsworm? You are too ridiculous for site chat. You better be careful or you will be deported. Appreciate it. Thank you. No. He's going to edge us today. Terrible. So those are the main news stories. There's a few other things I want to cover, but I think we just get straight into the letter. I think that's where we start, straight at the letter. Also, there is a big vote on the Support Ukraine Act today. We'll talk about it once the vote is finalized. Obviously, I've been following this very carefully with my work at Track Ukraine. That's at Track Ukraine across all social medias. We Track Ukraine at gmail.com if you want to volunteer. And this is like a big moment. I mean, we know that there's going to be a Ukraine aid bill that passes here in the Support Ukraine Act. The question is whether or not the Support Ukraine Act is going to pass in such large margins that there will be no ability for the United States president to veto it. Because if that happens, then we have a guaranteed $9 billion worth of support, over $9 billion worth of support going over to Ukraine at the same time that Rubio is telling senators under pressure in committee that they're unlocking the $40 million that was passed again by Congress, but the Trump administration has chosen for months to let sit there and not send it over to the Ukrainians. The question would then be at that point, how do you stop the Trump administration from blocking the over $9 billion in support offered? Making sure that he listens to a veto-proof majority. But I'm getting ahead of myself saying about at that step. First, there needs to be a vote. And then there's a question of how much the vote was won by. And if it's won by 2/3, then we're good. If it was won by less than that, then it is up to Trump not vetoing the legislation, which is far from certain since Trump has been a staunch opponent of more support for Ukraine. And while the majority of this is not direct aid to the Ukrainians, there is aid to the Ukrainians of over $1 billion worth in this legislation. So there is a strong possibility that he will veto it, saying that this legislation is threatening the negotiations. If we showed the Russians that we're willing to support the Ukrainians, if we show the Russians that the war will get harder, if we show the Russians that the war will not get easier, then the Russians will come negotiate for some reason. It seems to be the logic. It's not good logic, but it is their logic. And they will be damned if they will be moved off of it. There seems to be some moves in MAGA world that could suggest otherwise. For example, you see Laura Loomer and her channel, despite the fact she was the one who promoted Boneface. Remember that like random American neo-Nazi that had a bunch of embarrassing face tattoos, made him look like a skeleton, who said he was in Azovstal and he got evacuated. Mind you, those who got evacuated on helicopter from Azovstal, I mean, you had to be pretty horribly wounded or part of a very, very select few. And the idea that they would take that moment to get Bonehead out of there is ridiculous. But because Bonehead was able to go online and edit a very poorly done like Ukrainian military ID, she bought it, she ran with it as a story, and now, for whatever reason, Lauren Boebert's media empire is starting to do on-the-ground reporting in Ukraine, and the reporters are getting marginally better and better. And it is embarrassing that there is Laura Loomer's news brigade that is doing better work than some, number one, actual news publications, and number two, alternative media outlets that would otherwise not be too bad. So that's both embarrassing and also shows the ever-changing alliances in MAGA world and Republican town. So quite an interesting schedule today. I'll see. I don't know if there is any stream of the vote on the Support Ukraine Act. I don't think so. I think we're just going to hear about it, but let's see. Maybe it's on C-SPAN. That would be my first thought. Seeing if there's a live feed we can get from C-SPAN here. Yes, there is. I don't know if this is the vote on the Support Ukraine Act, but there is a live feed. I expect the Senate expected to vote on $70 billion GOP reconciliation bill funding. I know that the Support Ukraine Act is also on tonight, but exactly when they're going to do the vote, that's dependent upon the Senate's speed. That's dependent upon the Senate. Okay, I cannot control that. Techno Viking. Hi, Techno Viking. Hello. Hello, hello. Okay. So we're going to start with the Zelensky letter, and from there, also, I saw Steve Rosenberg got confronted by that Russian propaganda, Sasha. And I thought it'd be funny to watch that since we're obviously big Steve Rosenberg fans here. Okay, I'm going to start with this letter. So, President Zelensky has issued an open letter to Vladimir Putin. This was done on June 4th, at least Ukraine time, and it seems to be an angling towards two goals. Number one, an offer to end the war in Ukraine, and number two, diplomatic positioning. See, by writing an open letter, penning an open letter to Vladimir Putin, Zelensky says two things. Number one, that he is willing to freeze the front line along the current line of contact, which is the offer. So basically a unilateral ceasefire, which is also what Trump was asking for on the campaign trail. And he said that he would cut off aid if the Ukrainians did not agree to it and surge aid to the Ukrainians if the Russians did not agree to it. So it's off of that, Trumpian, pretty generous to the Russians. I mean, they get to continue to occupy roughly 20%, just under 20% of Ukrainian territory, continue the Russification programs. It's not an acceptance of these Russian annexations. It's not a forgiveness for all the Russian war criminals. It is not a, not an open letter for the Russians to continue in doing further invasions, but it is allowing the status quo, which is, not fantastic for the Ukrainians and for the Russians when it comes to amount of land that they're taking. I mean, they're taking 20% of the territory, roughly 20% of the territory from the largest country entirely within Europe. I mean, the territory being annexed is larger than some other European nation state, right? And the Russians, their argument to the United States has been, well, okay, but give us more. That's generally been their argument. It's give us more, give us the rest of the Donbass, give us, the rest of Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, Liman, Konstantinivka, Druskivka. You have to give us all of this. Give us the fortress belt line. And maybe later we're going to come back to the question of Kherson and Zaporizhia, which, according to the Russian constitution, is still annexed by Russia. And there's also, of course, if you look at the Russian economic forum, there's been some talk about the future of Odessa, future of Kherson. It's not like Russia views this in one or two little quick spats. Vladimir Putin was talking about during a recent interview where he was responding to a bunch of media, hey, I could be in office until 2036. And so when we think about like 1 or 2 years, it is perfectly possible for the war to freeze this year and then resume in 4 in Putin's mind. Because it's not a question of, Putin thinks he's going to be around for 1 or 2 more years, see the end of the war, and then he's going to retire, and he's going to go out there, and he's going to go into a farm field, and there's some romantic view of Putin kind of recluding into his private villa, covered in gold and riches, and just kind of letting Russia continue. Putin seems like the type of guy that probably would have to die in office, and then there would be a preceding power struggle if there was not a rapid decline in health that would lead him to step out of office otherwise. If there was not either A, his death, or B, signs that his death was near and upon us that could give him any time to make a decision to step down and prepare for that. Outside of those two scenarios, Vladimir Putin is thinking about staying around for quite some time. So just when you think about this offer of unilateral ceasefire and the Russians continuing to reject it, because the immediate reaction to this from the Russians was, well, if they're serious about negotiating, come to Moscow. Considering the Russians have tried to kill him multiple times, they have tried to kill him at the start of the war, they have tried to kill him throughout the war. Not a particularly fair offer, not a particularly serious offer. So think about this in that context, the context of the screeching Russian war effort as the manpower issue presses the Russians forward, as the power issue when it comes to Putin not wanting a challenge from at home due to the loss of support for the war, and the economic issue, which is ever increasing for the Russians. And so that, combined with the fact that Putin very well could view this like, okay, we'll just take a pause and we'll come back around once it's easier. Think about that when Putin's reading this open letter that the whole world saw. When you came to power in Russia more than 26 years ago, many people in Ukraine viewed you positively. Now, this is how it was, but this is now in the past. If you go view at Ukrainian approval ratings of Russia in 2011, they viewed Russia more positively than the United States. They viewed actually, in fact, the United States as a bigger problem for global stability than Russia. Then came 2014, and then came 2022, and obviously the picture has changed greatly. But there was really like a friendly relationship generally amongst most Ukrainians between Russia and Ukraine, and the Russians have ruined that reputation so quickly due to their behavior during this war. That's not to say that the Russians have never acted historically in a negative manner, or there weren't Ukrainians that never particularly liked Putin or particularly liked Yeltsin. No, but that is to say when you talk about general Ukrainian sentiment, it is not as negative as it is now. And that is entirely the fault of how the Russians have acted. When you came to power in Russia, I read that. Now the overwhelming majority of Ukrainians view it positively that our long-range drones paid a visit to the opening of your farm in St. Petersburg, covering a distance of more than 1,000 kilometers. As you know very well, that distance is not the limit of our capabilities. For 26 years, your time in power has completely changed the agenda of relations between Ukraine and Russia. From the discussions about trade and other civilian matters, our nations have moved talking about exclusively about strikes and losses. Can I also say, just quickly, I do want to throw this out there, and I know this is outside the theming of a peace negotiation. I do feel that I kind of have to show the general tenor of how social media is now for this war. I know I had it saved somewhere. 1 second. The official Ukraine account is posting some quite interesting things. Here it is. In reference to the St. Petersburg oil refinery attack. For those of you who don't know, there's oil refineries around St. Petersburg, and there's also military assets around St. Petersburg. One example is a naval asset that was hit I'm going to show you guys footage of in a bit. But the official Ukraine account posted this after there was this attack on the same day of a Russian economic forum in St. Petersburg that was occurring in the city, and obviously had to hear air raid sirens and the fact that this attack was going on.
No time to read.
This is from the official Ukraine account, government account.
No time to read a list. Approved. Next. Approved. I don't know.
I mean, communication in 21st century. I just don't know. I don't know if I'm really ready for these type of like shit posts being like in international relations, where I see this in my feed and it is now part of the news, part of the history books. Like these types of things, like in 80 years, this will be seen as like completely normal. This is not like in 80 years, like youth will be looking at this in history books thinking, oh, this is normal. This is how like communication is in digital era, digital age. You make little jokes like that. But so that weird feeling you're feeling right now is a unique feeling about this type of media, being in warfare, being in geopolitics, and it is a feeling that only our generation will feel and future generations will not feel. So that feeling you feel it to its fullest extent. But going back to this statement from the president of Ukraine. For 26 years, your time in power has completely changed the agenda of relations between Ukraine and Russia. From discussions about trade and other civilian matters, our nations have moved to talking almost exclusively about strikes and losses. You have spent nearly half of your 26 years in power waging war against Ukraine. Whatever you say about NATO, geopolitics, or the Russian language, this war is your personal choice. A war without a real cause. This is how history will remember it. Those years could have been very different. We often hear that you are comfortable with this war. Of course, not in those cases when it comes to the security of your residence or the parade in Moscow. Your own life is valuable to you. But now we can all see that Russians are finally becoming less comfortable with this reality, with the fact that the war is bringing more and more negative consequences to Russia. They do not like our drones and missiles. They do not like gasoline shortages and constantly rising prices. They do not like constant restrictions. They do not like your intention to launch a second wave of mobilization in order to expand the war into another direction in Ukraine or to use it against other countries neighboring Russia. They do not like the fact that there is no end in sight to your war. Yes, you can still force Russians to exist this way, but your resources are shrinking significantly. You will not have enough money or political capital to keep buying the loyalty of Russians the way you have for the past 26 years. And we will do everything we can to ensure that the world brings that moment closer. As you yourself like to say, we need to run the numbers. Yesterday, I received a report on the losses of your army on the front in Ukraine during May. Once again, the number exceeded 30,000 Russian soldiers killed and seriously wounded. We have been maintaining that level after a month, and we have video confirmation of every one of your losses. These are not empty claims. We know that 63% of your battlefield losses are killed, while only 37% are wounded. In the 21st century, no army can afford such a ratio, and the share of those killed will continue to grow. It is not as if we in Ukraine are concerned about the fate of Russian soldiers after everything your war has brought to our country, but I do care about Ukrainians. We are losing our people, and every loss is painful to us. Even when the ratio of Ukrainian losses to Russian losses is 1 to 5 or 1 to 6, it still matters greatly. It also matters when you regularly postpone every few months your own deadlines for capturing our regions, especially the Donetsk region, and you will not capture it this year either. But we in Ukraine do not want a permanent war. We know very well that life without war is infinitely better, and we want to achieve that. I am convinced that the majority of Russians would respond positively to this as well, and you know it. Many did not believe that Ukraine would be able to hold out for so long. You did not believe it, and those who advised you did not believe it either. That was a mistake. You did not expect full-scale resistance from Ukraine, and you did not foresee that things would go this far. Yet, here we are, in the 5th year of the full-scale war. Do not be afraid to take the path out of this war. This is the main thing that is required of you now. Ukraine has preserved its independence, and it will preserve it, despite all predictions to the contrary. We have united many around the world to stand with Ukraine and against you. We have found the weapons and the financing we needed. We receive support, you receive sanctions, and this will continue until there is justice for Ukraine, the justice we seek and the justice that can be achieved. We will not allow those who are trying to convince you that sanctions against Russia will be significantly eased and that support for Ukraine will be significantly reduced without any meaningful change in your position towards Ukraine to succeed. The example of Orban shows how those who choose to help Russia in its war against us end in disgrace. Ukraine has endured harsh winters while you tried to destroy our energy system. We held firm, and even in darkness, the resilience of Ukrainians remained intact. We brought the war onto your territory, and you would not have been able to cope with it without North Korea's help. You are the first ruler of Russia to turn to Pyongyang for assistance, and today you are fully dependent on China, also for the first time in Russia's history. You believe Ukrainians would not have the strength to defend themselves, yet today our people are helping our partners in the Middle East and the Gulf build their own defenses. You hope for internal unrest in Ukraine. Instead, it was your own military formations that staged a mutiny against you. June 23rd will mark another anniversary of that event, and silence will not erase this fact from history. And now it is you, whom your officials, businessmen, and propagandists look at with obvious fatigue. The world can see it. The world has grown tired of Ukraine, as you long hoped it would. The world has not grown tired of Ukraine, as you long hoped it would. But there is growing fatigue with Russia, even among those in the wider world who help you bypass sanctions and keep your economy afloat. You cannot fail to notice it. After 26 years in power, age is beginning to take its toll. After 26 years. And with time, the fatigue with you will only grow. We have seen intelligence reports showing that you are now considering plans to continue your war into 2027 and 2026. We also know that you hope ballistic missiles will achieve for you what everything else failed to achieve. You want to draw Belarus even deeper into this war, and we are now forced to prepare for that as well. We see that you are trying to orchestrate something around Transnistria. Your propagandists threaten, in one way or another, every country neighboring Russia. Do you really want to go through all of this? The choice is yours now. Enough of war. Ukraine proposes to end this war. This must be done honestly, with dignity, and with guarantees that the war will not be reignited. We see that the United States is fully focused on the issue of Iran, and it would be wrong to simply wait until the war in Europe returns to the center of its attention. Ukraine proposes ending the war through direct engagement between us and you. I am proposing a meeting. Everyone heard your representative, smiling, say that I could supposedly come to Moscow. But after these 26 years, there is nothing for a Ukrainian leader to do in your capital, just as there is nothing for a Russian leader to do in Kyiv. There are countries that have traditionally hosted leaders to resolve issues of war and peace. Switzerland, Turkey, and the countries of the Arab world. Many are able and willing to host such a meeting. It is leaders who resolve the key issues. That has always been the case, and it always will be. I propose to set a clear date for such a meeting. We have heard that you were promised in Alaska the resolution of certain issues concerning Ukraine and Europe, but you can see for yourself that Ukrainians and European issues are not decided in Anchorage. Other agreed participants could join the bilateral track to be established between us. Since the war is taking place in Europe and since Ukraine needs security guarantees, while you also seek security guarantees for yourself, it would be logical to involve those who can genuinely serve as guarantors. We believe Europe should be part of this process, those who truly have the capacity to influence the situation. We also believe the United States must be a part of this process. This is what could help shape a new security architecture for our part of the world. We've already experienced many agreements with Russia, including the Minsk agreements, that ultimately failed. That is why we must first find direct answers between us to the questions that remain and not hide from difficult issues behind formulas, technical working groups, or endless time lost in shuttle diplomacy. Your war has set Ukraine and Russia apart. The front line today is the line from which diplomacy must begin. Ukraine is ready for a full ceasefire for the duration of the negotiations. This is standard practice, and current developments around Iran only reinforce that point. An attempt to reestablish real silence is the best way to begin talking to one another. We believe it would not simply be an attempt, but a real ceasefire, if that is what you want. You know that the United States has the capacity to monitor a ceasefire along the lines where hostilities stop. Ukraine is ready for an all-for-all exchange of prisoners of war, and this could become a good prologue to ending the war. Serious steps must be taken to return civilians and children who were taken away during the war. We must determine what kind of future awaits the generation of Ukrainians and Russians who will come after us. If you do not personally come to the conclusion that it is time to end this war, Ukraine will continue fighting for its existence. We will have those who support us, but you too will have to fight much harder for your own existence. Not Russia's, but your own. And this is not a threat from me or from Ukraine. It is a fact of Russian history that you know well. When Russia grows tired, change comes. We can work towards that fatigue. You can stop your war. Eternal memory to all those whose lives were taken by this war. Glory to Ukraine. Okay, so we drink something. A lot, so my lips are parched. So, number one, this is really good positioning from Zelensky. Number one, it's the redoubling down of what was Zelensky's already declared position of accepting a unilateral ceasefire along the line of contact, which many people that I talk to in discussions, both those that I agree with most of the time and those that I disagree with, most of them don't seem to know that Zelensky has offered a all-for-all frontline ceasefire, and the Russians just said no. When I hear people say, well, why don't we negotiate? Why don't we offer a frontline ceasefire? A lot of negotiation talk that I have with candidates is just telling them that the Ukrainians have offered a ceasefire and that they did not demand Russia withdraw from every inch of Ukrainian territory for that ceasefire. They offered a ceasefire along the line of contact, a unilateral ceasefire, completely along the line of contact. And they have offered it multiple times after being compelled by the Trump administration and are now doing it on their own initiative without any compulsion from the Trump administration, without any threat of an intelligence cutoff or a supply cutoff or even the use of an intelligence cutoff by the United States. This is completely on their own initiative when they're not in the spotlight, when the world is focusing on Iran. And so this right here seems like number one, a somewhat genuine attempt, but number two, great positioning for the world stage, showing that the Ukrainians continue to offer this, bringing attention to the fact that the Ukrainians are offering this, offering it on their own, strengthening the claim that they're offering it genuinely. And when it comes to the United States, there is a Support Ukraine Act vote tonight. Now, I don't know if it will get a veto-proof majority, but it will pass. It already got the discharge petition through, the vote to bring it to a House floor vote passed with a slightly bigger majority, and now that the stink of a discharge petition will be off of it in an official floor vote, there is a chance that a majority of will not only be a majority, but it will be a 2/3 majority. And if it is, then it's veto-proof. If it isn't, I mean, Trump, I think, will likely veto it. There's still a chance maybe he doesn't if he really wants to get this war over before the elections come around and somebody is smart enough, maybe Marco Rubio or others, to convince him for at least a second, even if he flips his position immediately, that allowing this to go through, allowing Congress to do this will put pressure on the Russians to come and negotiate in good faith. And then maybe, just maybe, he can get a peace deal done before the elections in 5 months. And it is only 5 months away. And with it being so close, and Trump seemingly not getting any progress when it comes to Middle East peace talks. They say, hey, we have a ceasefire. Hey, the conflict is over. And then there's an attack on a Kuwaiti airport. An Indian national dies. Dozens more are injured. The United States responds with its own bombing. The conflict is over, but we're bombing Iran. The conflict is over, but Kuwait is getting bombed. The conflict is over, but people are dying. The conflict is over, but people are being wounded. The conflict is over, but airports are being bombed. The conflicts are over, but the Iranians are talking about targeting American military bases. The conflict is over, but the Iranian state media doesn't seem to be speaking that tune whatsoever. They're continuing to get the public ready for war. And so that war might continue for another week. It might continue for another month. It might continue all the way up to immediately before the election. It might even continue until, even though I still think this is not the most likely outcome, it is not an impossible outcome. It might even continue throughout the election. And so the Trump administration might see the ending of the war in Ukraine as somewhat more achievable in the next 5 months if they can make the Russians believe that Ukraine will be too big of a hurdle to get around. They've realized by now you're not going to get the Ukrainians to give up Donbass. Steve Witkoff's Tucker Carlson podcast peace agenda is not going to pass the Ukrainian sniff test, and it's certainly not going to pass the European sniff test. And so they have to change the equation, as we've talked about on this channel so many times before. They have to change the equation if they have any chance of getting the war over, of getting it to a conclusion, of making the Russians think, you know what, continuing the war is a worse idea than ending the war. And doing anything besides that leaves too much risk for the war to continue or for the war to quickly reignite once some political or especially military or defensive concession is made that the Russians can immediately take advantage of or take advantage of within a few years' time. Vladimir Putin wants to stay in office until 2036 if he could. And so, I mean, he could be planning for this war to end in 1 to 2 years and then planning to relaunch it in 4 years from his new positions ahead of the Donetsk region or in Kherson and Zaporizhia or with deeper dug-in positions in Kharkiv. Who knows? I do not want people to talk about this with no belief that the situation could get worse or that the Russians just don't desire to make the situation worse. I mean, those who say, oh, that the war was going to happen. Oh, there was not going to be no war. Oh, well, now that there is a war, it's going to be over in 2 weeks. Why are these the people you first go to and believe their promises of, well, if we just give this little bit more, then it will certainly be over, and then we can just forget about the situation? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that these people are being listened to, first and foremost, by many alternative media programming. But putting that all aside, this seems to be both an advertisement to the Ukrainian people that Zelensky is doing his best to end the war but will not concede Ukraine's national interest. This seems to be a direct offer to Vladimir Putin to end the war. This seems to be a letter to the global community. This seems to be a letter to Congress and those taking a vote tonight in Congress and potential legislators in 2027 who could also take a vote on Ukraine's support. Definitely if Democrats take back the House, especially if Democrats take back the Senate. And it also seems to be a letter directly to Donald Trump and his cabinet, those advising him that they are still trying to actuate Trump's agenda and that they're doing it on somewhat reasonable terms that Trump was asking for on the campaign trail, even though it's not what the Russians are asking for. And if you listen to Marco Rubio and you listen to Donald Trump, it's very interesting in the way that they're talking. Listen to this. Number one, Marco Rubio. This is 2 days ago. Well, 2 days ago, my time in Kiev, that is. Before Zelensky released this letter.
And back to your point that you made a moment ago, I don't think there's any doubt at this point in the minds of most observers around the world, and I would say in the minds of some inside of Russia, that the invasion of Ukraine has been a strategic disaster for them. They are not going to achieve the objectives they set out on day one for certain, and they may not even be able to militarily ever achieve the objectives they're demanding now in negotiations. I would also say that how we have viewed it is this war has no military solution. It has to have a negotiated settlement.
I mean, but military action is part of the solution. You got to set the conditions for peace for there to be a peace, right? Or is it an extension of politics? You know, really basic quote, but I mean, it's true. And people forget that it's not as simple as like wars. There's like the big war switch and you flick it and it's off. That's why you really shouldn't start too many wars, if any at all, because once you flip the switch, you know, it's not like a, oops, let me just click that off. Now the people are dying.
to it. And that's the role we've tried to play. And it's been a difficult role to play because, frankly, we're not an impartial mediator. We sanction Russia, and we are providing and have sold weapons through the Pearl program, which has remained unimpeded, to the Ukrainians. Unfortunately, those talks have stalled in recent months for a variety of reasons. The Ukrainians have actually made some battlefield gains in the last month as well. The Russians are losing 5,000, not injured, dying. In fact, it is the first conflict, according to the Department of War, it is one of the first conflicts ever in which the death rate is higher than the casualty rate on the Russian side. It's the first time ever that you have.
This was a Ukrainian claim that Zelensky made in his letter that Rubio right now, before the letter was released, is echoing.
More deaths than casualties. So
it's not just a Ukrainian claim, it's now an American claim as well.
You're right. Not only are the Ukrainians bravely fighting, they're effectively fighting. So the role we want to play is if there's a way to negotiate this thing to a peaceful, because ultimately this is going to be, the end of this is going to be negotiated. But it's been difficult because the demands that both sides have in order to end it have been far apart to this.
Yeah, far apart, but taking no specific position on the demands themselves. So you say you're not impartial, but then you're not, you don't lack that impartiality enough to take enough action to actually end the war. So you try to balance and both be not impartial, but also be impartial enough to negotiate an end. So that puts you in a position where you try to have the best of both worlds. And it's like, oh, I want pickles and I want ice cream. And then you put both together and it's garbage. It's bad. Garbage. If you try to both be like, oh, I'm independent and I'm not going to be biased here, but also we're biased here. You didn't get a conclusion on the front of mediating an end to the war, and you don't get a conclusion on taking enough action in order to bring about an end to the war. You achieved neither, even though you tried to achieve both, which is the cornerstone of the failure of Trump policy here, even with Rubio trying to reel it in. Here is Donald Trump himself reacting to the Zelensky letter.
Crossing, as we were heading in here, President Zelensky wrote a letter to President Putin. He wants the two of them to meet to hash out the end of the war in Ukraine because he thinks you are too busy with the war in Iran. Is he right?
Well, I don't know. I'm glad that they're maybe talking about meeting. I think we had a lot to do with it. I know exactly what you're doing. But I think it would be great if they met. They should get it done.
Mr. President, crossing.
So right there, somebody could maybe say, oh, is that a journalist trying to bait Trump into attacking the Ukrainians by saying he's too busy with X, Y, Z? No, maybe it's really hard to say. Trump seemed to at least think so. Either way, Trump didn't seem to take the bait if it was bait. And that's probably because Trump had said something actually similar in the days before this. Trump was very blunt about the idea that, hey, we're focused over here right now, to the point where we had Marco Rubio saying that they're essentially no longer mediating negotiations right now because they weren't getting anywhere. So he went from 24 hours to, we didn't get anywhere, and hoping that later they'd be able to mediate something. So again, showing the cornerstone of the failure of Trump's foreign policy, again, being Ukraine, trying to have your cake, eat it too, and then not having it. It's already gone. It's already gone. You didn't have it. You made it crap, and now nobody has cake. Either way, I think that this letter from Zelensky was smart from a domestic standpoint, smart from trying to speak. If any Russian read this, the majority of Russians would have stuff in here that they agree with, and it would make them think. Obviously, the Russian government has been restricting the amount of information that gets into Russia, so the exact amount of effect this will have, I don't know. Plus, a lot of Russians obviously have negative views of the Ukrainians, so how much they'll listen to the words of the Ukrainian president, and I also don't know. Zelensky himself has been pretty not happy about how much the Russians didn't listen to him at the start of the war, despite the fact that his comedy, his performances was something that spoke to the Russian world, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it, often, including big state performances and comedy shows where he would sing songs where a lot of the now same state broadcasters that sing on the bombing of his country clap for Zelensky. And so I don't know how much it will have an effect there, but there's also a political effect in Congress and the United States presidency that all makes sense to me. I think as a historical item, it's important, explaining Ukraine's historical narrative. As a diplomatic offer, it's important, and I think it was politically sad. Zelensky, when it comes to this, he seems to know what he's doing. Yarmak is, to be debated. Also, by the way, the Russians found out they were at war today. It was very funny. Russian state TV host Vladimir Solovyov was talking to his weathermen about the Ukrainian drones striking St. Petersburg. So breaking news, Russians discover they are at war. Breaking news, weather forecast, drones tomorrow, drones the next day, and drones the day after that. Just wanted to give that a quick shout out while we could. Oh, I did want to talk about the interesting reporting that Kaylin did here. See, I know we talked to two people. I want to get them both here. Yeah, here we go. I did want to talk about Irish aluminum in Russia and the problem of different products like Finnish copper and Irish aluminum that keep ending up in the Russian war machine. I mean, like, they're doing an investigation right now in Ireland on whether or not it's ending up in the Russian war machine. But when 83% of their aluminum exports are going to Russia, we're talking about like 14 ships a year going to St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is one of the hubs of the war. I mean, you got to be pretty stupid to think it isn't going there, especially when so much of Russia's economic growth and economic power right now, what's keeping the war afloat, is the war economy. I mean, you'd have to be pretty stupid to think none of that money had gone into the war machine. You'd have to be pretty naive. But if you believe that maybe it hasn't for as long as possible, then as, a local Irish politician, maybe that can benefit you in what you think is defending local constituents' jobs at the same time that you try to claim Ireland's historical position of neutrality he's making. But then this Irish reporter, Kaylin, who I've talked to before, he does a lot of reporting in Ukraine. He does a video talking about these Irish politicians directly going to them after going to the refinery that is making aluminum. 12, 14 ships go to Russia every year. And right now there's a question about, hey, should there be sanctions on XYZ companies for working with the Russian Federation's war machine? And the argument from some Irish ministers and Irish politicians is, no. Of course not. Of course not, because it would hurt the economy. We would also sanction other examples. They should be sanctioned. They should be shut down. Other wars. This war, though, I mean, it's bad, but, what you're going to do, you got to do business with Russia.
A curd is a curd.
While no pathway, no attempts have been made to find other customers for aluminum. Like, less than a percentage point of that aluminum goes to Europe every year. Why is it more going? Why is it more aluminum going to Europe every year? Why isn't that happening? So instead of looking for other customers, looking for alternatives, they have instead settled on continuing to sell for the Russians. I wanted to show two interactions with Freudian slip, Irish politicians talking about this aluminum plant.
So I've spent weeks here trying to get answers about the Russian-owned refinery that's right here on the west coast of Ireland. And almost no politicians want to talk about it. Everyone has been avoiding questions, emails, and phone calls. So I've come here to this village in rural Limerick to try and speak to one of the most senior Irish politicians who has defended the refinery. This is a guy who has said that sanctions shouldn't be placed on this and who's basically avoided questions from the beginning. And I've come to ask a simple question. Why is a Russian-owned refinery sitting right here on the west coast of Ireland still exporting materials to Russia's war machine 4 years into the full-scale invasion?
If we were to sanction Ahinish and stop sending its alumina, Ahinish's alumina to Russia, it would have no impact in Russia.
So what if there was an investigation?
They would be losing 14 ships of aluminum every year. And I mean, why are they buying it from Ireland if it wouldn't hurt Russia? If they didn't have it, that would hurt Russia. They would find other buyers, yes. But that means, redeveloping their shipping routes, redeveloping their trade routes, trying to find other sources that might be more expensive, other sources that would mean that Ireland could develop less dependencies on states that starts wars like this.
If that concludes that the material that's been sent out of this refinery is going to Russia's war machine, specifically weapons, would you then endorse sanctions? What do you think should be done if that happens?
I wouldn't get into hypothetics.
I really want to get into hypothetics. If the material that's being exported is going to Russia's war machine, missiles and drones, would you endorse sanctions? Technically, the ships leaving would become warships in some ways.
I'd give a comment on that if we had a definitive position in relation to it. Okay.
Why are politicians?
The fact that he is skirting around it so much to the point where he is creating a scenario where if these ships are confirmed to be supporting the Russian war machine, which we know they probably are, almost certainly, just confirming it, he knows it's so likely, he knows, that he can't answer it directly, would rather just delay answers, hope some miracle comes and it isn't. Good luck with that. Or, if it is, answer that problem when it comes around.
If we had a definitive position in relation to it, okay?
Why are politicians skirting around the issue so much? I mean, I've contacted you, I've tried to call your number lots in the last few days. I haven't got a response. In answering these questions, it seems like it's a very simple answer. If they're supplying Russia's war machine, then there should be sanctions or new ownership, right? So people still keep their jobs. Why is that so difficult to answer?
You know, they're not perfect tools, sanctions. They're never going to be perfect. We have international laws, you know. Some states uphold international law, other states completely flout international law. That's unfortunately the nature of the globalized world that we're living in at the moment.
And while Russia's still waging its war on the biggest country in Europe, you wouldn't have any moral concerns with this still being part of it, financially even. I mean, 14 ships every month go to St. Petersburg, directly from the port here.
I don't think it should be sanctioned. There's no Russians working there. It's all
Why are there
Irish
signs
people.
in Russian, do you think?
I don't know.
No idea.
I don't know. I've no idea.
Because it's strange. We're here in the west of Ireland.
If you drive around, like the signs for the factory, they're all in Russian.
And the signs in Russian everywhere.
Yeah, what?
You don't think it's weird?
I don't know. There's not a heavy Russian presence. There's an element of it which is owned by a Russian individual or individuals.
So if there's just
Hey, you know, when you go to Chinatown and everything's in Chinese, why do you think that is? Do you think that's because there's Chinatown? It's called Chinatown. It's Chinatown because Chinese people live. If there's Russian sign there, why do you think there's Russian sign there? Maybe because people who could read it Russian. Is there just a huge enclave of Irish people who just wanted to learn? I mean, come on.
Element, why is the website Russian? You know, .ru. I use a
.ru.
VPN to access.
Well, they're part of a group, I presume. I don't know.
And this interview explains why none of the politicians.
Anyway, this is the first one. He did a second one, which was in some ways even more stunning because the first political operator seemed to be much more slick about it. This guy, I mean, he stepped on every rake imaginable.
No, I wouldn't sanction it because people's livelihoods are on the line here.
But if it turns out that what's happening here is fueling, you know, Russia's war machine, the murder of Ukrainians every day.
Well, there is always a moral issue. There's a moral issue. We have the same with regard to Palestine.
If the refinery was sending materials to Netanyahu, would you say it should be sanctioned?
I won't. I'd have problems with Mr. Netanyahu.
Why Netanyahu, not Putin?
Well, they're a Russian company. And that's the answer.
Welcome, I'm very sad to say, welcome to a significant, sadly not like, you know, an insignificant, but a significant portion of the Irish left. Now look, this is not just the Irish left. There's also people on the Irish right. But, you know, it's not, Russophilia is not new to Irish politics.
Supplying Russia.
There's an investigation right now, it's still ongoing, on whether the material that leaves that refinery ends up in Russia's war machine, not just Russia generally. If that comes out that it is, what would you say should be done?
Well, I would say it's a matter for the cabinet to discuss and decide on.
Yeah.
And if they pull out of here, you know, the consequences, there'll be, you know, there are several issues in the background here. And, you know, it's unfortunate in terms of the war effort in Eastern Europe. But
the war effort in Eastern Europe, as apolitical of a description of it as you could imagine, there is a war in geographic region.
Anish has to continue trading.
Why do you think there haven't been enough politicians calling for like a diversification? Because Russia's 83% of the custom. There's a shortage right now of alumina. Why can't it just go to the rest of Europe or other countries? You know, Russia doesn't have to be the only customer. I think that would probably be a good solution.
We don't know. I don't know any of the people working down there or at the executive level because there's Russian interest behind
it. He's like, okay, look, I accept Russian interests would be determining, you know, the shipping of this supply of material to the Russian war machine. I wouldn't accept it if it went to Israel, obviously. But Russia, look, I don't know if it is heady thought. If it's another scenario, this one could give me a lot of political heat. So I'll say no. Did he not know immediately what the follow-up would be? Was he like, okay, I'll take the lack of political heat on Palestine, but I'm willing to take the political heat on this because jobs are on the line. That's what I think the ultimate calculation is. But it also shows like a complete lack of moral consistency from the man. We know what it is. These people have a lot of money, Russian interests. The Russian interests, he says, that are behind it. It could affect local jobs. So ultimately, he would rather take a hypothetical stand against mass war, imperialism, and ethnic cleansing versus a real life stand against the largest war in Europe, a war closer to Ireland, in the largest war in the world, coincidentally. Let's see. How are we going?
Mr. Daines.
What are they voting on right now? Do we know? I think that I was told that the final vote on the Support Ukraine Act is going to be even later tonight. That there was a second procedural vote, and now the second procedural vote is done, and now there's going to be the final vote. But yes, the final vote is still tonight on the Support Ukraine Act. So the people who are here for that, this is the location to watch it, because I am waiting. I'm waiting, and once I hear an update, I will immediately bring that update up on screen. Mr. Boozman. Mr. Boozman. Why not sell to Europe? Maybe because the margins aren't as good. I wonder why the margin wouldn't be as good. Oh, wait, maybe it's because giant war. Giant war. Maybe that's the reason. I don't know. Let's not think too much about it. Let's not make it too difficult for ourselves. So I did want to talk about actually a attack that did happen in St. Petersburg. There was footage released by Ukraine's unmanned system forces, which is their drone forces, showing the strike on a Russian guided missile corvette of the Russian Baltic fleet, showing the distance of Ukraine's drone war deeper and deeper into Russia. It was struck by multiple drones, and from the footage that we could see, we could say that a total loss is probably to be expected. And I've already seen satellite photos of the ship from above and Russian firefighters attempting to put out the blaze. They sure do love a certain genre of music. I've been talking to these press officers of these brigades for a while. I'm still thinking like the folk music would hit. Folk music would hit. My God, look at that destruction. Yeah, no, I don't think that corvette's going to be making any missions in the Baltic anytime soon. Another reason strikes like this that the Baltic states are quite fans of the Ukrainians. Gosh, look at it. No, it is burning. Oh, you can see that fell over. Yeah, the mast is fell. I mean, come on. Not the mast, but still. It's like it's a sailboat. Either way, not good. Not good. You know what else is not good for the Russian Federation? The fact that Al-Qaeda jihadists in JNIM, which are currently working with the Azawad Liberation Organization in a war against the government in Mali, and the Africa Corps Russian-backed mercenaries that are fighting in the country, released drone footage as they have expanded their drone capacity against the Africa Corps, the Russian mercenaries, and their airbase, attacking the air assets that they use to attack JINM. You can hear their music here. Mind you, when the government in Mali overthrew the previous government in Mali, part of the reason they gave was because they said they could stabilize the country. The country right now is less stable than it was before the coup, and these were the forces that were supposed to help them stabilize in lieu of the French. Now, we will not watch all of this, but I can tell you these 2 Russian soldiers here die, and the last one on the bottom left-hand corner, he crawls away. These soldiers that were servicing this Russian jet. So, yeah, no, pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. So that is the state of the Russian war effort in Mali. They have taken back some territory in the north, but they're taking casualties in the process. And the long-term goal of stabilization in Mali is still quite a ways away, and the casualties continue to rise for the Russian African Corps in the country. Not a lot of good options for the people of Mali at the moment. Another interesting news, this one is from Poland. This is from TVP World, the English Polish state media outlet. Poland backs proposal to bar military aid Ukrainians from EU protections. So there has been a few debates going on that kind of intersect here. Number one is there's a debate in Europe about the continued presence of Ukrainian refugees. There are some in Europe that say Western Ukraine is particularly safe, so these people can go back. Number one, this doesn't take into account that many of the people displaced are people from Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, or even Crimea before, and then were further displaced from these occupied territories. There's also people in the Dnipro region and border towns just along the front line that are starting to get displaced. There's people in the Kharkiv region that were displaced. There's people in the Sumy region that were displaced. And then, of course, when you look at the air attacks on Kiev, they continue to expand in size. There's missiles that strike, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, but also an increasing and ever-increasing amount of drones, with record-setting drone attacks continuing to hit Kiev and digging deeper into the country. It is true that Western Ukraine is far away from frontline dangers like artillery shelling, mortar shelling, FPV drones, night bomber drones, grenade dropping drones, landmines being dropped everywhere, anti-personnel mines being dropped everywhere, cab strikes, like those types of big 10,000 pound bombs that get dropped. It's true of that, but when it comes to the long-range war, it's still very much in danger. And instead of Ukraine working to protect that part of the country to make it so those people could be safe to return, they have instead started talking about whether they could return without that protection. At the same time that the Russian drone effort has expanded so much that we even see Russian drones now going into Romania, a NATO state. And the Romanians coming back to the Russians and essentially saying, can you bomb Ukraine in a more polite way to our borders? So Ukraine, despite getting its most sizable support from Europe, is still not supported in Europe in all ways as it should. And Europe is not even looking out for its own interests in all ways that it should. So when it comes to this type of air defense plan, but when it comes to the protections, there's the questions about, these people, quote unquote, taking jobs, these people taking up state assets, even though in Poland, they contribute more to the Polish economy and more to the state budget than they take out in assets. This has already been calculated by Polish economists. Despite these facts, there's a question about how long these people should come around. And then there's a separate question in Ukraine, which is, where do we get manpower to hold the front line? There is a reason for Ukrainian national society and civil society to survive. There's a reason for the survival of the Ukrainian state, of the Ukrainian nation. There's a reason to protect the language. There's a reason to protect the culture. There's a reason to protect individual rights. There's a reason to protect freedom of the press. There's a reason to protect freedom of speech. There's a reason to protect Ukrainian democracy. There's a reason to protect the continuation of the government. There's a reason to protect their home. Right? There's a reason to protect all these things. There's a reason to angle for a peace on good terms, or good enough terms, or as good as possible terms for the Ukrainians. But that also means everybody chipping in through the draft, which is still largely supported by a majority of Ukrainians who do want to continue the war with these types of conditions, but they would also like to see a cessation on the current lines, which the Ukrainian government just offered to the Russians. They need more manpower, though, to hold the front line. Despite the fact that Ukrainian drone warfare has made it so much less men are needed than was needed previously to hold the front line.
We're back in World War I, World War II. You're talking, 1,000 men for this kilometer. 2,000 men. Who knows, depending on where it is. Where now you can talk about, in some areas, we're talking about like 15 men holding like kilometers of front. 15, 30 men holding like kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers of front line. 30 men if, it's a dangerous area is not unrealistic. And so the Ukrainians need people to rotate those who volunteered early on. They don't want those people to feel punished because they volunteered and now they're in forever. And now they also need people to hold the line. And so if these people were stripped of protections, these military-age men, and they were sent back to Ukraine, many of them would end up in military service. And so the Ukrainian government, despite not, of course, wanting to activate against Ukrainian refugees, they could benefit from the inflow of manpower that these protections being removed from military-age Ukrainians in Poland. Of course, though, this brings up a moral dilemma for EU governments about like both their strategic objectives, which would be served by having these people honestly go to Ukraine, their economic objectives, which in some nationalist governments they might be viewed as better as sending them back. Others thinking, hey, it's good to have the labor, it's good to have these people contributing to the economy, and the moral equation of should you be sending these people back to a war that many of them would rather not fight, or they'd rather somebody else fight on their behalf, which is a strange belief that people do hold. People still hold. So, interesting story, but whether or not this is going to go through. Because it was comments from the Polish Deputy Interior Minister, and that does not mean it's going to become law. It's just that it has been something that is being talked about, and it might, something might happen down the line. Okay. I don't know if you guys saw, but the U.S. Fine Arts Commissioner, Rodney Mims Cook Jr., did show up to the St. Petersburg Economic Conference, the same one that, was not enjoying the Ukrainian hello from the skies. This is the same, representative that was sent that Marco Rubio, when asked by reporters, he said he didn't even know existed. This is Kirill Dmitriev, one of Putin's right-hand men. He is an envoy for the presidential office in Russia, responding to people talking about the fact that America has any sort of representative there. Financial Times is shocked that the U.S. Fine Arts Commissioner participates in the St. Petersburg Forum, shows the White House ballroom, and is fond of Russian culture. Financial Times will be even more shocked by the strong U.S.-Russia economic cooperation, even before the ballroom is constructed. So, the Russian advisor here heavily betting on the idea that the United States is going to continue to develop ties. At the same time, the United States currently has sanctions exemptions placed on Russian energy export product. Mind you, those time-exempt sanctions that have been placed on that product continue to get exempted. And as the Lion of Ohio said, the longest-serving woman in Congress, Congresswoman Keegan said, if they are time-exempt but keep getting extended, that means they're inherently not time-exempt. Time-exempt sanctions mean they don't last continuously through extensions. Time-exempt sanctions mean they expire on a certain time, and they keep extending them, and they've extended them 3 times. If they extend them a 4th, at what point can you say these are not time specific sanctions? These are just sanctions exemptions. Period. Because the longer they kick it down the road, the easier it will be for them to try to normalize it being permanent, even though it will never be simple, and the majority of Americans will not be too happy about it from the polling that I've seen from Gallup. Not some huckster pollster or like the Reagan Institute. Gallup. From Gallup. Also, Ukrainian Anna did an interview with the Pragmatic Papers, who also did an interview with us, with Track Ukraine, about the efforts at Track Ukraine. So if you want to read that Track Ukraine Pragmatic Papers article, What is Track Ukraine and Why It Matters, that was written by Thomas R. Ullman, or you wanted to read the article on Ukrainian Anna on drone warfare survival and the life facing Russia's invasion, which was also written by Thomas R. Ullman, you can go check it out. I really like the graphic art made here. Really good. Also, here's a cluster munition, evidence of a cluster munition used in the city of Dnipro during Russian long-range drone strikes and long-range missile strikes, showing that the Russians are using, in at least certain examples, cluster munitions in densely populated areas like Dnipro. Waiting to see any update on that track Ukraine Support Ukraine Act vote. Anything? Oh, here we go. Ooh. Boy, that vote total, that nay vote total from the Republicans. I'm not too hyped about that. 10 yays is good, but we need a 2/3 majority. We don't just need a strong majority. We need a 2/3 majority. And if we're talking about, 450 men and women, we're talking about 1 second. I'm terrible. I'm trying to see if we got a specific vote total. Like, I know that's the vote total on screen, but if we got like the names up, I think we're gonna have to wait after to see the specific names. But we're talking about like 300 votes. So, I mean, that's what we need to get to. We need to get to 300 votes, roughly speaking. Right? Now, there are like a few people who have like lost their position, so it might be like a few. I think 300 solid is where we need to get at. So right now we're 135 to 91, 11 yay Republican. We're going to get every single Democrat. We're going to get every single Democrat, and now that we have a registered Kevin Kelly as an independent, that should be a yay vote as well. He was a Republican, but he turned Democratic. Hey, we saw the yay vote go up and then go back down. They're teasing us. They're teasing us. I think we're not. Oof. It's hard to say because I don't know the order in which these votes are happening, but I think that we were going to get a ways off of a 2/3 majority. It looks like we might get like a 3/5 majority, which is a majority, but not 2/3. I think a majority of Republicans. I don't know if they think that the war can be compelled otherwise to end just through talking. But I think a lot of it is two things. Number one, Mike Johnson is running with the idea that the Russians have talked as if the war is ending sometime soon. If you read what Zelensky wrote in his letter, which just went out, about his proposal to the Russians to negotiate, he says that the Russians are talking about planning in the 27, 28. The Russians are talking about taking the Donbass by the end of this year, which means they're not thinking about ending right now. And in fact, if they don't achieve those goals, they might push into 27. The war continues and continues and continues throughout the majority or maybe even the entirety of Trump's time in office. So I don't know how convincing that was. The other thing is, though, Thomas Massie got yoinked. And it wasn't just Thomas Massie. There was a bunch of other people. A lot of, the majority of the Indiana Republicans that stood up on the issue of redistricting on principle, they got yoinked. And so it could be a combination of Mike Johnson giving people false hope, as well as combined with the Thomas Massie Indiana Republicans loyalty check. Excuse my horrific coughing. But I think it could also be that loyalty check. Now we got 108 nays. That means there's still about 100 Republicans to vote. So it isn't impossible, but depending on like the order of who's voting here, like when you got 99 still left, that's still a lot of progress that needs to be made up. I mean, so far there's only been 4 gained votes since the votes that have been made on the previous procedural processes, which we were hoping that it's the procedural, stink of a discharge petition vote and usurping the Speaker of the House went away, that it could move the way for a 2/3 majority vote. Mind you, if it passes without a 2/3 majority vote, that does not mean the legislation is doomed. It means it goes to the Senate without a 2/3 majority vote, will likely pass the Senate, and then could go to the president's desk, which he could veto. Now, maybe, depending on the day and how he feels, he doesn't veto it, but obviously there's a high chance of vetoing. Republicans are disappointing. A lot of them are, and the sad thing is that there is a lot of people that we at Track Ukraine graded green. That after this, I do believe we're gonna have to go through and grade red, because specifically we were hoping that, hey, look, we're graded to do something. Better to try and to possibly have failed. But either way, the fact that we're having this vote now, when Trump's in the White House, this administration doesn't really want this vote to begin with. And even with this administration not wanting this vote to happen to begin with, it happened. So if Democrats take back the House and Senate, the conditions could be very different. Especially if by then, there has still been no progress on negotiations. That's at least the hope. None of these things are guaranteed, but you need to keep looking for pathways forward legislatively. That is activism. That is getting legislation through. We got about 10 more nay votes that just went in on the Republican side, a bunch more Democrat yay votes. There seems to be one nay vote in the Democratic aisle right now. We don't know who that is. If I had to suspect, number one, my first suspicion would be somebody hit the button wrong, and that happens. I remember Liz Cheney voted against one of the packages. People were like, what? And they was like, oh, sorry, oops. So it could be that. It could also be, I don't know. I mean, Victor Gonzalez met with those sanctioned Russian MPs. It could be some other Democrat trying to differentiate. I don't know. There's a reason why Track Ukraine exists, and it isn't just to correct quote unquote Republicans. But we don't know. We'll see who that is. Fetterman, it's a House vote, so it can't be Fetterman. Can't be Fetterman. I mean, we add the 39 to the 185, and we're like, what? We're talking about still needing 70. Nope, it's not there. The votes are not there for a 2/3 majority. I've just saw the votes tip over in a way that, no, it's not going to work. I mean, it's going to be a majority. It's going to be a bipartisan majority. It is going to be a significant amount more than in the procedural votes when it comes to the Republicans that will vote yay here. But I can do the math right now and tell you it will not be a 2/3 majority. They would need every single vote left in order to get close. I mean, it's just the likelihood is very low that all the yays waited until the very end just to surprise everybody sitting at home like us. What is this vote on? It is on the Support Ukraine Act, which would make available $9 billion worth of assistance to the Ukrainians. Only a little bit over $1 billion of which is actual aid. The majority of which we're talking about land lease program. We're talking about assistance that the Ukrainians would actually be getting on lend. So it's majority loan to the Ukrainians plus a tiny bit of aid, and it is creating that much opposition within the Republican ranks. Once again, solidifying the fact that the Democrats are way, way, way ahead when it comes to the war in Ukraine, when it comes to its membership in the House. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's going to be 200 nay votes. So, I mean, it's pretty solidly not 2/3. Don't worry, George Soros is coming up with a plan for the last votes to tip the scales. I sure hope so. Sure hope so, because it currently does not look like it. Currently does not look like it at all. My goodness. Well, we're over 200 for the A vote, so it is going to win the vote. It is going to get a majority of votes, so it is passing. It is going to the Senate, and it is likely to go before the president's desk. But it is not likely to get to 2/3 majority at this stage. I mean, even if it got every single vote in waiting, it would not be enough to be the 2/3. So, I mean, like, when you look at the Republican vote total here, I mean, it is the Republican coalition to support Ukraine has lost a lot of members. I mean, we're going to have to go through, I'm going to have to assign somebody at Track Ukraine to go through everybody who had previously gotten green rankings at Track Ukraine. And we're going to have to probably make a lot of red rankings because there is Republicans that we were trying to push in the right direction here, that some of which did move in the right direction, Mike Lawler. But I mean, like, oof, that is a big total. Why is there a timer if you know they're not even voting? Yeah, that's kind of a problem, isn't it? By the way, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some abstentions at the end of this. There's some Republicans who, fearful of the general demographic, revulsion towards banning the Ukrainians, but also fearful of any reaction from Trump, negative reaction, will just abstain and try to pretend, I guess nothing's happening. Oh my gosh.
Burns is
an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man. Hey, Sir Mentos, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. I appreciate that greatly. Thank you, thank you. Have a good weekend, Dylan, in chat. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for the tier 2 sub of all things. Wow, I appreciate that. Saying that on a Thursday in the States. It's already Friday here in Ukraine. I'm more right-leaning, conservative, liberal. From a European standpoint, this makes me sad. Well, your coalition is 15 people in the United States. Congratulations. Well, it looks like maybe more in a second. I mean, there's like in a context in a year, right? When I look at these numbers, this is what I think, right? So we're gonna have to wait until exactly what the total is. But give a year's time, more failed negotiations, 2.5 years of failed negotiations instead of 1.5 years of failed negotiations. Will that plus a Democratic House and Senate be enough to get a veto-proof majority? Because Trump, if he doesn't control the House and Senate, foreign policy is an area where the president has outsized influence, so he might still try to manage that a lot firsthand. He could still veto it, but I do wonder if it does get vetoed now, and in a year, the veto is the problem, whether it can be enough building on this and taking seats from the Republicans, it will be enough. And I know that the Senate has been historically more pro-Ukraine than the House. And so, maybe. But then again, you're losing senators like John Cornyn, who would vote in favor of it this time around, but isn't going to be around next time. Maybe he'll be replaced by James Talarico, who is pro-Ukraine, but maybe he will not. Maybe he will be replaced by Ken Paxton. Oh, are you in Ukraine right now? Yep. I am in Ukraine. I don't think he will veto it. I mean, it's it's not impossible that he vetoes it. I mean, like, I'm going to be honest, it is very, very possible. Let's put on some elevator waiting music while we listen to Well, that's nice, isn't it? 34 left Republicans to vote on this. 12 Democrat, 1 nay that I'm very interested in. Who is that nay? Who hopefully let their hands slip? By the way, it's officially passed. 215. Huzzah. That's enough votes to pass the Support Ukraine Act. It has passed, but it is outside the range of a veto-proof majority. But I'm still interested in the exact vote totals, because that could be important given a year's time. So we're still hoping for as many Republican votes in favor as possible, and to find out what that one Democrat is. Hopefully it's a slip of the hand, because, you know, I am slightly worried about Vincent Gonzalez, the fact that he met with the sanctioned Russian MPs. But I do wonder if whether that is Democrats just wanted to be in the room or not, and he just bit the bullet, or if that is a show of a larger pattern of behavior. Could be somebody else too, who knows? Or of course, as what I said is most likely, slip of the hand. Which is also possible for 1 or 2 of these nay votes to switch over to yay, but I would say that is highly unlikely and is delving even near copium, I would say. Delving near copium. If you want to support the program as we're heading back to the front in a week, donate at DylanBurns.tv/donate. We're Dylan Burns TV on Patreon. 217 votes in favor. Got another Republican in favor. 29 have not voted. 11 Democrats have not. It's a difficult vote position for Ukraine aid. I mean, it's passed. If you believe that Trump isn't going to veto it, then we've got what we need. I still highly suspect that he will, and he will say that this could sabotage negotiations and that we don't need to give them any more blank checks. Mind you, the majority of this package is Lend-Lease, but whether or not the majority of this package is Lend-Lease, a little bit over $1 billion is aid.
Occurred is occurred.
So who knows? Hey, Booler, thank you so much for the $5. Don't worry, Dylan. I sipped a gold McDonald's gift card on Trump's desk to sweeten the deal. Let's hope. Let's hope. $218 solidly passed. I'm hoping we can get to something like 230, because without Trump repercussion and Democrat control of the House and Senate, you can build that into a veto-proof majority, I think. At least I think. Definitely if Trump's popularity continues to go in the downward direction, which is not necessarily impossible. Especially since right now, like, the polling seems to consistently put him at around 35. Right at the edges of what people have said is like the MAGA base. Also, unrelated to the exact vote that's happening right now, but the United States has just imposed fresh sanctions on Cuba, targeting the president of Cuba and the military elite. Rubio has announced these measures against Miguel Diaz-Canel and the defense ministry over what they are calling, quote-unquote, subversive actions. This is after the CIA held negotiations with the Cubans in Havana, posted pictures of it on social media, but shows an increasing American pressure campaign to gallivant and dominate the Americas, especially against its historic rival in Cuba ever since the overthrow of the Batista regime by the communist Cuban revolutionaries. Elevator music conjures mental images of serenity before falling from great height. True. I'm thinking we're gonna hit something like 235 looking at this. If we're generous with a few more Republican yays. 235. I said like 240 would be sure. 235, 240 makes it a possibility. Which many people would have said aid period in the Trump era wouldn't be a possibility. They had to wait until after the Trump era. But it shows that we're still in at least swinging range. Cuba did nothing to us. Largely. Yeah, largely. Definitely in the modern era. I will say they do have a lot of mercenaries going over to fight the Ukrainians. That's pretty bad. I was just invited to a PV, Progressive Victory AMA, with a Maryland County candidate. The same one I was actually at the PV Choose Your Fighter event rally. But it's right now while I'm streaming, so obviously I'm with you all, and we're waiting for the votes to finish and come in. Come on, can we get to at least 20 Republican yay votes? There's 11 left. There's 11 left. Come on, wait, because it was a difficult choice and you make the right one. Gosh, we're really gonna have to go in and fix some of those green votes, which is a real bummer. But it's also gonna make our grading process much easier, because, you know, in 80% of scenarios, a Republican gets a really bad ranking. 85% of scenarios from the way it's looking. My goodness. There's at this rate, with these numbers, this is, funnily enough, there is more support amongst there's another vote, Republican vote. There's more support amongst the base in the Republican Party for Ukraine than there is in the legislature. And that's where I think Trump's whipping comes in.
Cheese Wizard got a tier 2 subscription.
Hey, thank you for the tier 2 sub, Cheese Wizard. Good viewer of the channel. Getting rid of his white name in fight chat. Leaving just Saxolotl as the only viewer today with a white name. Dylan shows us not gotta shut always. Always, even if you're white name. We're at 26 votes in total. Gotta put 5 more Democrats in the vote total in favor, and that puts us at 231. If you assume that one nay vote was the slip of the finger, which I still think is the most likely scenario, hopefully it is, then that puts us at 232 votes, and that's 10 non-votes so far from the Republican side. And so, I mean, that does make the 240 number I talked about for trying again in a post midterm election scenario possible, but not likely. We're gonna fall a little bit short of it, but not too short that it makes it impossible. And again, right now, this is all assuming that it will not just go through with 0 veto. But with this type of vote total, it is hard for me to imagine there wasn't some whipping from the admin. Don Bacon, one of the few Republicans who voted in favor of it. I got some words from him we can play right now as we're waiting for the last votes to come in, so we can get that vote total, so we can know where our Congress stands on Ukraine.
Ukrainian cities every night with ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles, and we better be there to help them. Or in the history books, it's going to say United States failed when it's most needed. And I know this. I want this House to stand on the right side. I want Republicans to stand where Ronald Reagan would be if he was here right now. Ronald Reagan would be voting yes tonight. He'd be standing up for Ukraine and opposing Russia. This is our Churchill moment, or our Chamberlain moment, and by God, I'm going to choose Churchill, and this House better choose Churchill tonight. With that, I yield.
The House did choose Churchill, but is it Churchill enough? Is it Churchill enough? Or are we talking like Bangladesh Churchill? Gallipoli Churchill. By the way, from the new election data that's coming up from the Los Angeles city election, it looks like Spencer Pratt is done for. That it's probably going to be Karen Bass versus Nithya Raman, and Karen Bass is the likely front runner in that matchup. But that Spencer Pratt will be knocked out in the first. ground. That's at least what the data that's coming in looks like, but we'll have to wait and see for sure. By the way, as this vote is going on and we see the Republican, another vote from nay from the Republicans, another vote from nay on the Republican side, leaving only 8 left, making that 240 number I was swinging at harder and harder to get to. But speaking on Republican indifference to European security, Pentagon likely to cancel missile deal with Germany over fears of Russia. The decision is part of a broader American retrenchment from the NATO alliance. The Pentagon is expected to cancel a plan to send Tomahawk missiles to Germany, partially because officials are concerned Russia will view it as an escalation. Oh no, what will they do? What will they do? Mind you, we had American missiles slamming into Russia itself, and there was no consequent escalation.
Sax Zero Lot L got a tier 1
Hey, look at that.
subscription. I was wonder why I was breaking out in a cold sweat. It turns out it was because I became a white name again.
Thank you so much for Saxolotl for the sub and rejoining the supporters here at Site Chat at DylanBurnsTV/donate. The Pentagon is expected to cancel a plan to send Tomahawk missiles to Germany, partly because officials are concerned Russia will view it as an escalation. A startling reversal of a long-planned agreement with one of America's biggest allies. U.S. officials fear Moscow will retaliate if the Trump administration follows through on an effort to deploy precision missiles in the middle of the continent, according to 2 European officials and 1 American official. So again, if the Russians are going to be deterred, are they going to be deterred by America being afraid to put military assets in Germany, let alone America being willing to send Ukraine aid in order to make the Russians come to the negotiating table, instead of fulfilling the Russian image of an abandoning America? The Biden administration and leave Berlin without defensives, German leaders say they desperately need. The move is part of a wider American retrenchment from the NATO alliance, including canceled deployments of thousands of U.S. troops to Germany and plans to pull back certain assets, as the U.S. upends the close-knit partnerships that cemented the relationships for generations. Europe can now step up in the near term. General Alexis, NATO's top commander and head of the U.S. forces in Europe, told military leaders this week. America, he said, will refocus equipment and forces elsewhere. American officials, even if primarily fearful of Russia's reaction, likely are also worried about the shrinking U.S. weapon stockpile. The U.S. churns through thousands of Tomahawk and Patriot missiles in the first week of the Iran war. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, turn off the elevator music. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told Congress last month that it will take months and years to replace the munitions spent in the military conflict. The likely Tomahawk reversal is particularly unsettling for German officials who are rushing to modernize their atrophied force to serve as a bulwark against Russian aggression. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said last month that he did not expect the U.S. would station Tomahawk missiles in Germany due to limited availability of the cruise missile, which can travel over 1,000 miles. The Americans don't have enough for themselves right now, he told German public television. But that's different than not even selling it to the Germans. The U.S. unveiled further changes to its role in NATO this week at a quarterly conference of military leaders. These include reductions in fighter jets, drone and naval units, according to Welt, part of the Alex Springer Global Reporters Network, which includes Politico. The whole point is to give allies the information clarity they need to drive forward as quickly and effectively as possible, said a Defense Department official, who, like others, was granted anonymity to discuss internal conversations. This is about allies taking primary responsibility for Europe's conventional defense. Okay, by the way, just to be clear, that a big part of why Trump wanted these European continents to spend 5% on military spending was they wanted the United States to benefit from European defense packages. That's why it was less, hey, build new factories, build new ammunition this, ammunition that. And it was instead, hey, buy American this, buy American that, when Trump actually got into the pitch stage. But if you sell it like this, if this is the way you're going to go, expect more missile factories in Germany. Expect Europe, if they're smart, to coordinate to build factories in the location where they would be cheapest. They would build with the least amount of red tape. They would be up and running the fastest, and they will be able to run them the most hours consecutively. And by the way, Ukraine is always the clearest case for those conditions. The Pentagon did not resist because they're under wartime construction and production conditions. The Pentagon did not respond to a request for comment. Berlin has felt retrenchment particularly hard. The Pentagon this spring canceled the deployment of 5,000 U.S. troops to Germany, a move that stunned the European officials and GOP defense hawks. The troop decision, which reduces levels to what they were before the Ukraine war, came after Murr said President Donald Trump had humiliated himself with the Iran war. The Pentagon has not yet released a plan for these troops, two American defense officials said, and whether they might deploy elsewhere in Europe. The U.S. may worry about Moscow, but Germany and the rest of Europe must contend with an all-out war between Russia and Ukraine on their doorstep. Russian forces have long deployed nuclear-capable Iskander missiles to the Kaliningrad enclave between Poland and Lithuania. They have also placed medium-range Oreshnik missiles in Belarus, which can reach all of Europe in a matter of minutes. Eastern and Central Europe have eyed the moves warily, as they are still working on fielding their own comparable systems. We submitted an official request to the Americans a year and a half ago to import, that is, to purchase Tomahawk missiles, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius told German public television last month. We are still awaiting a response, but to be honest, given the current state of the world, I don't have much hope in that regard. Pistorius expressed interest in buying American Typhoon ground-based missile systems, which launched Tomahawks, on a Washington visit last July with Hegseth, according to Germany's defense ministry, but he has not received an update. German officials have been exploring European alternatives to fulfill the long-range precision gap, which they will now obviously pursue. The debate in Berlin is less about any single weapon systems than how quickly Germany can acquire the ability to hold targets at a distance, whether through off-the-shelf purchases, expanded production with allies, or longer-term European development. Drones and cheaper systems may help, but German defense planners do not see them as a one-for-all replacement for Tomahawk-class missiles. German officials are worried more broadly that the U.S. pullback will force Europe to close military gaps faster than its defense industry can deliver. We're still on 8 no votes, 8 not yet voted for Republicans and 4 for Democrats, and 1 no for Democrats that we believe to be a misclick. At 227 total yes votes, 191 no votes. This missile thing is scary for real. Look, I think that this is, yes, one of many signs as to why I think a Trump veto on this Ukraine Support Act is a possibility, and I think a strong possibility, and I would still even bet the likely outcome. But I would also say that the United States has spent an exorbitant amount of Tomahawks in the Middle East, and so I do think the United States is thinking about reserving it post, those use of that weapon. I will say that probably would have made it easier if they gave the weapon to the Ukrainians, exclusively told them to strike drone factories, and then these types of things could end up back in the hand of Russia or its allies to launch against Europe or launch against U.S. forces in the Middle East. But, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Hindsight 2020. Still waiting on this vote to take place. By the way, Pussy Riot on Twitter just thanked Representative Gregory Meeks and Don Bacon, the co-sponsors of the bill, and told off, cussed at those who were against it. The feminist masked punk rock art group, Pussy Riot. Well, now we know for sure every remaining 8 and 4 votes will vote in favor, because Pussy Riot has given their opinion. Also, the Save America Act just got rejected as part of budget reconciliation in a vote of 48 to 50. So, Trump's not going to be too happy about that. Oh, we got the final vote totals, I think. Let me see what the final vote total is. The final vote total, as I am looking at it here, is... Oh. There seemed to be one change their vote from yay to nay. An independent voted yay. That's Kevin Kelly, of course. And 5 no votes, like no voting, on the Republican side, and 4 no one voting on the Democrat side. They could clarify that after the vote, so those 9 could be clarified later, maybe. But 226, assuming every non-voting Democrat, might go through with a veto-proof vote in the future. We're talking, and, those no-voting Republicans might be forced to do a vote, and that one Democrat hand slipped. We're talking about 230 potential yay votes for sure, if it had to be locked in, and we're trying to get a veto-proof at the bare minimum. Looking at 2027 for a veto-proof vote after a Democratic retaking of the House and Senate, which is what I think is the next best chance for a veto-proof majority if Trump ends up vetoing this, which, while it has passed, is what I still think is a likely outcome.
Irish heritage and field and ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Okay, that's it. That's where we know the vote to be. 230 roughly. Passed, but not veto proof. Man. I was hoping there'd be more Republicans. I thought it would be more Republicans. But I really think that Trump fear is set in deep. Let's hope that Trump knows that vetoing this will be bad luck. And that he actually wants to get a settlement to help him around the elections. Let's hope these two things combine and he just lets the bill do the work for him and does nothing. That's what I'm hoping for now. Because with this majority, we should get a majority in the Senate. In fact, this majority in the Senate might be a higher percentage because the Senate is traditionally viewed as more pro-Ukraine than the House. Plus, John Cornyn's still in it. Less war since World War II, and many are voting for or against stopping it. You mean they're voting against stopping it? Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But, it's the world we live in. It's our planet Earth. But hey, it passed. That's a positive. It's something to be happy about. Now it's just a question of, will Trump veto it? And if he does, then we can use that. We can move on that. Over 70% of Americans want more support for Ukraine. If Trump is not only not getting support to Ukraine, but stopping Congress from doing it, that is something to go after going into the election, helping to set the conditions for a vote in 2027 if he chooses to veto, which we do not know yet. It's good to know what we're going to do moving forward regardless. And that's what track Ukraine will be angling toward. For the little bit of political operating I'm doing on the matter. But hey, maybe this argument will suffice it. Maybe this argument is what's, cutting into the brainstem of Republicans right now and making sense. Here's Republican Representative Luna from Florida, who led those sanctioned Russian MPs to the United States on a propaganda tour. Here is her talking about how there is a peace deal.
And regarding the war in Ukraine, are you in favor of giving aid to Ukraine? Zelensky has been asking for Patriot defense surface-to-air missiles. Would you be in favor of voting for that?
I'm actually very glad you asked this question because I have been a part of those open dialogues and discussions. I've met with the Ukrainians. I've also met with the Russians. And what I will tell you is that right now, this war is at a stalemate. I think that if you're looking what happened historically, the aspect and the perspective of the Biden administration was to kind of just give Ukraine what they needed, not necessarily looking for them to win, but ultimately would not even engage in having diplomatic discussions, which you would figure that if you're going to engage in any of that could potentially wrap the United States into a war itself, that you would want to at least lead first with these peace talks. And
they did before the invasion. They did at the start of the invasion. Then they stopped until they thought the Russians would be serious. The then Trump rushed into negotiations head first regardless, and then they got nowhere. So I don't think it would have changed anything.
They didn't, which is, in my opinion, a failure. But ultimately, to answer your question, no, I don't support more aid because right now there is a peace deal. It is President Trump's peace plan for both Russia and Ukraine.
The one he proposed on the campaign trail is what the Ukrainians just offered directly, and the Russians are going to reject.
Right now,
and has been offered before.
Russians, to my knowledge, have agreed to that peace deal.
They have not, but that's probably what they told her.
It is the Ukrainians that are holding out. Really, not even the Ukrainians. It's Zelensky because he's concerned that it will impact his potential upcoming election. And does it? And
yeah, there's a Russian peace deal that Zelensky knows that if he agreed to, the Ukrainians would reject it because the Ukrainians would say, "Hey, don't give up our homes, please." I mean, that's not that surprising.
Remind us of that peace deal. Does that include Ukraine giving up land?
Potentially, yes, in the Donbass region. But what I will say is that...
See, yes, she's talking about Russia's peace deal that she said that all these parties agreed to, Russia agreed to, Trump agreed to. As far as we could tell from the public discussions that we were seeing what the Trump administration does say they agreed to, Trump said publicly that the Ukrainians would not have to give up all of the Donbass. Now, unless he said the word Donbass without knowing what it is, talked about it without knowing what it is, then that's a different thing than what Paula and Luna's saying. But I think this could also be our long-term theory, which is the Trump administration knows Ukraine is popular, knows supporting Ukraine is popular, wants the war to end anyway, and so privately said to the Ukrainians, hey, if you want to end the war, accept the Russian proposal, or it can drag on, hoping that they'll end the war by accepting the Russian proposal, while also not directly getting involved in the war, because they don't want it to be defined as Trump's war, even though every time they fail at negotiating, after promising that they would end it, he does make it his own war in some way when the Russians allow Trump to carry out and drag out the war. And not to mention, like, you know, if you want to compel an end to the war, which is the easiest way to deal with the problem, you got to take action. You can't just, like, hope and pray.
Specifically for this right now, if Ukraine was able to get security guarantees from the United States, if there is the potential, which there is, for there to be a $2 trillion trade deal with the United States, Russia, and potentially even Ukraine.
Even Ukraine. Oof.
The ability for all of Europe to be met with lower fuel prices, I think that that's a major...
Why is she negotiating on behalf of Russian energy companies right now? Why? It would benefit the United States more if Europe bought more American LNG. Why is she negotiating on behalf of foreign energy companies?
And for everyone involved, not to mention on both sides. I don't care if you're pro-Russia, I don't care if you're pro-Ukraine, but you...
Potato. For child trafficking, against child trafficking. You know, can't we all just get along?
You have to admit that there have been many, many deaths, into the hundreds of thousands of people that are just basically running into a buzzsaw, and we cannot continue to allow that to happen. And so if you're asking me if I think...
And so you need to make the Ukrainians make concessions that they will never make, and then we can float above the war, pretend we were peacemakers because we just told the Ukrainians to surrender over and over and over again.
That, you know, Americans should be on the side of selling weapons to a foreign country where we should be leading with peace first and foremost. I'm going to say no. I think that...
Hey, sorry to say this, but peace is not just achieved because you put your gun away. The other side didn't put their gun away. It just worked that way. No wars ended that way.
Lead with the peace talks, and I think that will also happen too. And Congresswoman, just to clarify on something you said that you met with Russians. Does that mean Russian government officials?
That's correct. I actually got approval from the State Department. We actually had a diplomatic meeting with other members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, over at President Trump's Board of Peace. And that meeting was actually the first time in over 20 years, which goes to, I think, the previous failures of other Congresses to actually maintain an open up diplomatic dialogue with a foreign country and nuclear superpower.
All right. And sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. I just wanted to get to call.
You had to just... I'm telling you, man, there's just some people that love that Putin aesthetic. They love the Russophilia. They just can't get enough of it. Yum, 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 yum. Yum, 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 yum. Do-do-do-do-do. You know, it's crazy because like this is my father. We're like, hey, you know, there's a specific time you cannot call me. It's between this time and this time. And all other times during the day you can call me. At this time it's like literally like 2-3 a.m. My time. Like, okay, got you. And every time he misconstrues it as this is the time to call him. And then he's like, why can't I hear Dylan? It's because I'm in a bunker. I'm in a bunk. Like it's not just don't call me these times because I'm working. Don't call me because I'm in a bunker, and bunker cell phone connection isn't that good. But you know, people just don't understand what bunker living's like. Good old style homeschool bunker living. You know, as God and Jesus intended everyone to live like mole people. Well, you said that last time? Yeah, because it's true. Not the first time I've had this problem. It's a recognizant. It's an issue that seems to keep turning its head around. Zara Rule.
Burns
Thank you
is
so much
an
for the primer.
immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. Oh, did you guys see Steve Rosenberg getting confronted by Sasha Meets Russia, the Russian propagandist? Pretty funny because she thinks she like really owned him, but like Steve comes off great here, in my opinion.
Hey Steve, why weren't you in Starobilsk filming the terrorist attack?
Who are you?
I'm Sasha, I'm a blogger, Sasha Meets Russia, so I'm just curious, why not?
Well, I'll tell you exactly why.
Yeah, because I feel like Western audiences should know that, no?
Well, for some reason, our explanation hasn't been voiced here.
Well, why don't you voice it?
For 2 years, the authorities...
Beautiful cut, as always, in good reporting. Immediate cut.
Said it's not safe to go to Kursk, Bryansk and Belgorod, and suddenly we were being invited to go to Luhansk. So obviously, it wasn't. The conclusion was it wasn't safe to. If it's not safe to go to Kursk and Belgorod and Bryansk, then it wasn't safe for us to go to Luhansk as well.
And yet other journalists still did.
That's their decision, right?
But you're a journalist.
However, I stayed in Moscow and I told the story of what happened in Starobilsk.
You're a journalist. Of course it's not going to be safe, but you're there to report the truth. Anyone can sit in their comfy apartment in Moscow and report on...
Oh my god, she's so whiny. Wah, wah. Hey, old man. Hey, man, like going in his 60s and 70s. Why don't you go to the active war zone with all the drones flying around? Why do you just rely on other reporters like Reuters? Why is it that when you tried to go to the war zone other times when you were a little bit younger and then they said no, it was too dangerous, you're applying the same logic consistently in the areas where mid-range strike drones are increasingly attacking vehicles in higher and higher frequencies? Wah, wah. Oh, the Western audiences need to hear about XYZ. You don't care about civilians getting killed. She only cares if a Russian dies. If a Ukrainian dies, if a Ukrainian baby dies, a Ukrainian teenager dies, Ukrainian man dies, Ukrainian woman dies, the entire Ukrainian national idea dies, that's perfectly fine to Sasha, right? Sasha meets Russia as a perfect representative of Russian culture because she is just as heartless, just as bloodthirsty, and just as much of a revanchist as the leading Russian cultural socialites and elites. So, I mean, Sasha Meets Russia is a great ambassador for the mysterious Russian soul, at least as it currently stands at the center of this Russian world that we know of.
Whatever they want. It's another thing to go there and see it with your own eyes.
But for 2 years, we have wanted to go on the ground to Kursk and to Kursk and Bryansk and to report on the ground what is happening there and why people there are living under shelling and what it's like for people there. But why haven't the authorities allowed us to do that?
But why didn't you go when they...
These are all great questions. But she didn't expect this. Is like completely outside of her dialogue tree. So it's just like, why can't you, old man, go to dangerous war zone?
But why didn't you go when they finally did?
Like, how old is she? Sasha's like, what, 20 something, right? This young airhead. Like this, how old is Steve Rosenberg? Steve Rosenberg age. Let's look it up right now, actually. He is nearly 60 years old. Okay. Hell, hey, I guess she says, hey, this looks like the age of the average Russian volunteer. Let's go recruit him for the war effort. That was her first thought.
Have safety. But the thing is, we're talking about...
If you were so eager to go when the chance finally happened, why didn't you take it?
We were told for 2 years.
He never asked to go to Luhansk. He asked to go to Kursk because it was more interesting and people in the West cared about it. People don't care about this strike in Luhansk. I mean, that's just, welcome to the mainstream media. But also, he's like a 68-year-old man. When he was asking for the Kursk coverage, he was 66. You know, it might not sound like a big difference between 66, 68, but when, 56, 58, it's a big difference. I mean, you're approaching 60. You know, Social Security checks right around the corner.
It's finally happened. Why didn't you take it?
We were told for 2 years it was safety. For safety reasons, we couldn't go. And we passed it on to London. That was the reason given why we weren't given permission to go.
Well, that's an easy excuse. Oh, it's not safe. I'm not going to go. But if they're...
It's an easy excuse that they're abiding by the same government that you spend 24/7, you know, lauding and polishing the boots of. They say that this isn't safe, but something that's in the same conditions, actually in some cases worse conditions when it comes to mid-range strike drones, he has to go, or you know, that's very convenient. By the way, the strike in this one location is not as big of a story as the Kursk incursion. Sorry, it's not.
Foreign delegation of journalists that's allowed, that's permitted to go and see what happened and report on the truth. Why wouldn't you take it?
Do you think I ignored what happened? No, I didn't. I reported from Moscow.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, why didn't you go?
Well, I'm telling you about the...
Why didn't you go on Russia's propaganda tour? Wow. My God. This is why I couldn't do reporting to Russia, because I would just laugh at this woman. I just laugh at this woman, like I'd call her a clown. I'd say I didn't go because I don't care. Like I don't know. There's a million things like I don't care to like be part of the propaganda tour. I'll look at the results from Reuters. I'll just look at the information and report it as a journalist. Like I couldn't do it. I couldn't do what Steve Rosenberg does, which is why I give him so much credit.
Safety reason.
Okay.
And if you
then
could accept that or not accept that.
Maybe you should be a journalist for sports then. I think that would be much safer, no?
No, I think I'm quite happy being the journalist that I am.
Okay.
And thank you very much. So
you fucking clocked her. Clocked her. 7-stream streak from T-Rex. Lady influencer is acting like a 7-year-old. I don't know if I call her lady influencer, but she doesn't know how to go outside of the dialogue tree she pre-prepared. She didn't. Simply had no explanation for. By the way, Candace Owens is like in pure like propaganda mode. It's like, oh, Russia's so fantastic, and oh, Americans are so tired of supporting Ukraine. It's not what Gallup says, but it doesn't matter. Oh, Paula Ann Luna's not happy with the vote. And the fact that it passed. The same people that have refused to entertain the idea of peace, referencing Ukraine and Russia. I wouldn't say that. Has to say that. Have to be. Hey, be clear. Let's bomb Iran. To be clear, let's bomb Iran. Oh, we're so bad. No, bomb Iran. But, you know, when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, of course, they have never supported the admin's peace talks efforts or up in arms that there's a peace deal on the table. What she means is that Russia has offered that Ukraine give up more land that Russia doesn't control, and then they'll allow for a ceasefire, not an end to hostilities, a ceasefire. That's a non-starter. They know it's a non-starter. Paula Ann Luna is now a negotiator, a diplomat for Russia's war aims. That's what she's doing. Pathetic, but I mean that's what she's doing. She met with them in Congress. They gave her marching orders, and that's how she's been behaving ever since. If there is a peace deal on the table and it's not advanced forward, then the Trump administration is failing even more catastrophically, because that's not what they're saying about how negotiations going. Rubio seemed to suggest otherwise. So is it Paula Ann Luna and Rubio, who's the actual Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, saw different things? Yeah, no, I don't think the novice Congresswoman has more information than Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. I don't think that to be the case. Also, I do want to give credit to New Jersey's 12th congressional district candidate, Dr. Adam Hamoi. This is the problem, you know, being somebody who works in politics, is I cannot pronounce English words. I cannot pronounce English languages. So I suck. But the dude won, and he committed to supporting a vote on Ukraine aid, Ukraine defensive support, and pushing the Democratic Party to do so. So I want to give him credit. I want to, you know, give him all the credit in the world. If anybody in chat could tell me how to correctly pronounce it so I don't make a fool of myself. Amawani. Seeing if there's any other updates on the floor vote, any other big statements. Any tip of the hat from the Trump administration, which I think is part of the reason why the vote was so deflated from the Republican side. What are these edits in my timeline? Why is this edit in my timeline? What? Wow, well, you know what, Rubio? We'll see. Okay, I wanted to talk about a pretty interesting story. The French Navy intercepted a sanctioned Russian Shadow Fleet tanker. Now, the Russians are calling this piracy, but this is not the first time this has happened. The United States took a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker and seized it off the coast of Venezuela months ago.
Degenerate Liberty has donated $10.
Hey!
It's odd dumb.
Thank you so much for the $10, Degenerate Liberty. Long-time viewer of the channel. Always appreciate your comments. I see you on the socials and stuff. Thank you so much for the $10. It means a lot to me. Thank you, genuinely. Thank you. Where was I before I got distracted by a fantastic financial contribution, which others can join by going to DylanBurns.tv/donate. DylanBurns.tv. So, the first Russian Shadow tanker fleet vessel that was taken was a Russian one off the coastline of Venezuela. This was done by the Trump administration to increase the pressure on Venezuela, to show that they were serious about it. While also, I'm sure some in the administration, like Marco Rubio, saw it as a pressure tool against the Russians, while avoiding trying to send more financial aid or military aid to the Ukrainians, the most clear and most effective pressure valve against the Russians. After that happened, there was one more seizing of a Russian vessel that was off the coast in the Baltic Sea area. And now this is the first time the French have gotten involved in seizing Russian naval vessels. JD8019 with $3. Literal treasonous behavior from APL. Be safe. Thank you so much for the $3. I appreciate that. And I will do my best to be safe. I appreciate that. Thank you. So, the Russians are calling it piracy, but if the Americans are doing it, if other European states are doing it, if the French are doing it, and the Russians have no immediate reaction, while the Ukrainians themselves are also targeting Shadow Fleet vessels in their military strikes, they did it actually in their recent mass strikes against Russia. They released footage of them striking a Shadow vessel fleet, and there have been other examples of them attacking Shadow tankers. These are the tankers that advance Russia's economic war. These are the tankers that transport Russian fuel and bring back the money that makes ammunition, that makes drones, that makes missiles, that makes tanks, that makes armored personnel carriers, that pays military salaries, that pays the payments to the recruiters, that buys the ads for the armed forces, that recruits foreigners with tricks in order to tell them that there's construction opportunities, that there's educational opportunities, that there's athletic opportunities in order to get Africans in Ukrainian trenches dying instead of Muscovites. This is the budget that does it. And if you target the ships that move the fuel, if you target the refineries that refine the fuel, if you target the pipelines that move the fuel, if you target the ports and the port infrastructure, the loading equipment that moves the fuel from the port into the ship, into the sea, if you target all of these things, then you will undermine the Russian war machine. And if the sanctions stop being time exempt, if they continue to cut these sanctions in and allowing the Russians to benefit from that, then they will continue to benefit from that. And $250 million more will flood into the Russian war machine than if the United States was to simply flip a switch and say, we believe sanctions should be placed on Russian fuel. We believe that American economic influence should not be used to bomb Ukraine, should not be used to push along the largest war in Europe since World War II, should not be part of America's abandonment of the Ukrainian people, which 70% of Americans support not abandoning the Ukrainians. So, to me, this combined strategy of French aggression, German aggression, Swedish, Finnish, Baltic aggression against the Shadow Fleet, while the Ukrainians attack it militarily and the United States reinstate sanctions. The United States leads the way with the first vessels being seized. Since an example, the best thing the United States could do is not even continuing to seize vessels, even though continuing to seize vessels would both get the point across and do the physical work of disabling the ships that advance the Russian war machine and help to avoid America's own sanction regime. But it would also make the point clearer and make it easier and give more cover to other European states to do their own defense and seize the vessels themselves. And put more pressure on European states to stop taking in that Russian energy. And what avenue does that leave open? American energy, of course. There is both a moral reason and a national security reason. Just tell that to the United States Congress, though, which just had that vote without a veto-proof majority. And now we're waiting and hoping on Trump's, laurels as the defender of Ukraine to get it through. This picture is so crazy. By the way, next stream I'll have a full list of all the Republicans that voted in favor and about that one nay Democrat vote if we find out it was a slip of the finger like I suspect it is. Oh, by the way, yes, I saw the Graham Plattner story that Graham Plattner sexted women and was aggressive towards them. I mean, it didn't look like he beat any women or he did anything that's described as raped, but it was like inappropriate behavior. Seems to be what is being described. And he also cheated on his wife with sexually explicit. Even though his wife said she doesn't appreciate how the story was used and put out there after somebody abused their trust. Here is a footage of him. Here is footage of Graham Plattner, who looks as guilty as can be. Just look at that face. That's a guilty face. On MS Now, talking to Chris Hayes.
I want to talk about the piece that came out before this, which was about
New York Times piece. You can go read the whole thing if you want yourself.
What your wife had alerted your internal campaign folks to, and just to sort of stipulate to get out ahead that, like, I think some people view this as a real betrayal by your former campaign manager, and that may be true, and I understand. And I also watched the video that your wife put out, which I found incredibly compelling and moving, about what you've worked through. But just to be clear again on the details here, and there's obviously two subtexts here, right? This is you facing Maine voters at a primary and also a general election that's going to happen. We all know that, right? We're all on the same page. Were you sending sexually explicit messages to other women back in 2023, 2024, as reported in the piece?
So this is the first time in my life that Amy and I's marriage has been the interest of people besides Amy and I.
Yes.
And it's definitely a bit jarring, a bit strange.
Yeah.
It's also a marriage that is very strong and that I do believe we deserve some privacy in. I will just say this. At the beginning of our marriage, I made mistakes, and Amy held me accountable for them, and we worked through them. And the work that we did made our marriage significantly stronger. And who we are today is an incredibly faithful and happy married couple. Amy is my best friend. I love her more than anything else. And quite honestly, the hardest part about this whole campaign is I don't get to spend as much time with her as I like to. And so it has been it's been a hard experience to have gone through this together as a couple long before our lives were brought out into the public. And then to have it essentially outed by someone that we put our trust in, who then turned around and betrayed Amy's trust, and has now turned, frankly, our private parts of our marriage into a bit of a public political spectacle. It's hard, but it's our marriage. And it's a good marriage, and we're very happy in it and very happy with each other. And I thank my lucky stars.
Honestly, Graham Plattner comes off as so authentic that I don't know if this will. People are saying that this is it. This is like it for Graham Plattner. And his polling was already not looking great. He was only down now only to up 4 points according to his campaign's internals, which tend to look better for the candidate. Maybe he's only up 1 or 2 in reality. Like maybe they're tied. You know, if you want to talk about the polling differences between Susan Collins's last election, but polling's also improved election after election. Either way, is not ahead by a huge length. And then this new scandal comes out. We'll have to wait and see how the polling affects it after that. But there has been some questioning on whether or not Graham Plattner should drop out. Graham Plattner should be replaced, and Democrats should quickly, but not Janet Mills, because obviously that didn't work. But now Graham Plattner finding somebody else to run it. But I think the most likely scenario is that Chuck Schumer will avoid the issue. AOC will avoid the issue, as she has. Chuck Schumer basically sprinted away from the press when he was being asked about whether or not they still endorse him. AOC said she was going to let that race play out on her own. Ro Khanna said that maybe Graham Plattner could work this out and explain his decisions to voters. So there's still parts of the party staying aligned with him. Bernie Sanders said before this story from the New York Times came out today, he sent messages of support in favor of Plattner. So Plattner still has connections, especially amongst the progressive wing of the party. But at the end of the day, these scandals after scandals after scandals is not going to help Plattner. And, there is a Democratic upswing when it comes to these elections. But, Susan Collins is a political survival as a Republican in New Hampshire. And her winning is very much still a possibility. And her beating a scandal-ridden Democratic challenger is definitely in the cards. So if Graham Plattner is to survive this, he's going to have to spend the entire campaign having to deal with these claims, establish his own positive message, and swing at Susan Collins and create a negative perception about her time in office and about the possibility of her continuing to be in office for another 6 years.
Marriage, but I really do feel like I need to get these answers from you, which is the people you were texting with, whatever that was, in whatever context they were adult women, you knew that, and it was consensual. Is that true?
Yes.
And you have that you confirm that you knew their age.
Yes. Oh God. Yeah. Yes, of course.
Sorry, I just thought that was funny. I'm not an Epstein. Modern American politics. Okay, with that, I know that there is an AMA with a candidate, Josie, who's running for Montgomery County Council in my home state, and there's an AMA, there's only 10 minutes left, so I wanted to, end stream so I could quickly participate in that. It's going to be in the Progressive Victory Discord channel if anybody wanted to jump into that and listen to that. And then I was going to work on finishing a national security document explaining national security issues for Track Ukraine. I wanted to do that before I went to bed tonight. So I will be back tomorrow for tomorrow's stream. We will have more to talk about. We will have more to discuss. We're going to cover news stories outside of Ukraine. I know we've been focusing a lot on Ukraine, but it came back from the front, and that is to be expected. We're going to talk about the election results, the primary election results. We're going to talk about the path forward for the Save Ukraine Act, in my opinion. And that's the Ukraine stuff we're going to cover. We're also going to give more of an update on Mali. We showed some of that footage today, obviously. We're going to give more of an update, I think, when it comes to Myanmar. And we are also going to give an update when it comes to the war in Iran, because there have been developments there, an announcement of an end of hostilities as bombings continue to go off. And obviously those two realities don't seem to really mesh. So we'll be talking about tomorrow all those issues, as well as the daily domestic politics in the United States. Good night and good luck, everyone. I hope you all have a good one. We're going to talk about the Great Hassan Crash Out. Look, his opinions about John Mearsheimer are ridiculous, I think. I think John Mearsheimer has gotten it wrong so many times. Listening to him on predictions is like listening to the people who led us into disastrous war after disastrous war. If you are wrong about the war happening, if you're wrong about how the war would be carried out, I don't think you should be listened to about how the war is going to end. Anyway, good night and good luck, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Donate DylanBurns.tv/donate. DylanBurns TV on Patreon. Drop the Twitch Prime subs if you can, and follow us at DylanBurns1776 on Twitter, DylanBurnsTV on Instagram, DylanBurnsTV on Blue Sky, and at Track Ukraine on all social media accounts, and we track Ukraine at gmail.com if you want to volunteer to support Ukraine. Good night and good luck, everybody. Bye-bye.